Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Saiyan Fanfics, back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Became Strongest Without Quirk. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Wait a minute friends, I have one request to all of you. Please support and give kudos to the author and make sure to comment. Love from Saiyan Fanfics YT. So he will not feel any regrets for giving us permission to upload his fanfics, and the fanfic link is in the description. People are not born equal. Yet despite knowing this, it did not stop 5-year-old Izuku Midoriya from doing what he thought was right. Sure, his quirk was diagnosed quirkless and made a social outcast, with today's society having a hard-on for quirks, but that wouldn't stop him. Enough Kaken, said Izuku bravely despite trembling himself while standing in front of another boy who was crying on the ground. You already made him cry. I won't let you abuse your quirk and harm others. Oi, Deku, began the spiky blonde kid with red eyes as he smacked his fist into his palm, activating his quirk to make a small explosion. The quirkless wonder thinks he can play hero. This boy was Katsuki Bakugo, who was Izuku's friend until he got his quirk. Let's get him, shouted another child, his fingers extending until it was twice as tall as he was. Another chubby child with red bat wings that allowed him to hover above the others nodded in agreement as the three boys charged in to attack Izuku. After quickly ganging up on Izuku, with the long finger boy holding Izuku hostage while Katsuki and the chubby kid pummeled him. Katsuki was using his quirk, which allowed his sweat to excrete a chemical similar to nitroglycerin from his palms and ignite it to create explosion. Izuku felt his eyes starting to swell from the impacts. You're just a useless Deku, sneered Katsuki as he continued to punch Izuku. You wanna be a hero? You're worthless. This was not the first time that the three boys were beating up Izuku in public. They didn't even consider what they were doing as bullying, but rather heroes beating up a bad guy, aka an easy target. Nor did they even consider a sense of fair play. Izuku was losing hope in this society. He had seen a hero even pass by, only to do nothing as he ignored them. Another hero even gave Katsuki a thumbs up, shouting something about beating up the null and showing the proper hierarchy before giving an L-shaped salute with his right hand. Not that the boys knew what it meant, but it just reinforced the fact that Katsuki thought he was in the right, that he was a hero. Alright, I'm getting bored, let's finish this with a bang, grinned Katsuki, raising his hand once more. Take this, villain. Before he could finish it, a hand grabbed his arm, stopping Katsuki cold. That's enough. The boy hasn't even done anything to you all, and yet you find it amusing to torture him, and even have the gall to call yourselves heroes. Where's your sense of honor or humanity? The voice that spoke to them had a chilly tone that cut all them to their core before they looked to the source to see man with long black hair with a tint of blue, tied up into a ponytail that went past his shoulder blade. His clothes, however, looked quite weird, wearing a white-collared cloak with a blue tang suit underneath it. What's with the weird-ass ancient-looking clothes? Blurted out Katsuki before struggling to get out of the man's grip. Let go of me. I wasn't doing anything wrong. Villain, let go of the child, shouted a hero while sliding into position. There will be no kidnapping under my watch. It was the same man that had given them the L-shaped salute several days ago. You're kidding me, scoffed the man. These three were bullying the other child, and you turned a blind eye, and yet when I stopped them, you come rushing in now. Where's your sense of duty and justice? All I saw were some kids roughhousing around while also establishing the proper hierarchy and preparing the quirkless brat where he belonged. Underneath us proper humans as slaves, sneered the hero. At this point, he's not even worth being called a human. While two of Katsuki's lackeys cheered upon hearing this while not understanding his words, Katsuki frowned at this. This wasn't what he wanted. Sure, he thought Izuku was a Deku, but that didn't mean he thought Izuku as someone who wasn't even human. Did he? Izuku was starting to tear up upon hearing a hero of all things calling him that. Why wasn't I born with a quirk? Questioned Izuku. Even something as minor as being able to bend my toes another way or something. Instead, just having that second joint has made others not even treat me as a person. The man, however, laughed loudly as if he heard a joke. If that's true, then the rest of you are just ants below me, declared the man. The hero's eye twitched before raising his arm. Then show me your quirk, villain. Quirk. Don't got one of those, nor do I need one, shrugged the man. I got the extra pinky joint like the green-haired kid does. But I warn you, you're courting death if you want to fight me. Then you're a stupid fool, grinned the hero maliciously as he began to charge up his quirk. I can kill this man legally, saying that he was a threat to society. Nobody would care because he's quirkless. For liberation, for redistro. 4. Why is this man's fist getting bigger? The hero didn't have time to think anymore as the man punched the hero in the face so hard that the hero was knocked unconscious, as well as being slammed into the ground. Well, that was pathetic, scoffed the man as he wiped his hand on the hero's costume, courting death indeed. Now then, the man turned around to see Katsuki's lackeys already running away. with Katsuki halfway towards them, though hesitating before reaching his hand towards Izuku. "Come on, Deku. We need to get out of here," shouted Katsuki, extending his hands towards Izuku. Izuku didn't move, unable to decide what to do. On one hand, a hero had been defeated. On the other hand, the hero had been insulting him. And the man who defeated him had said he was also quirkless. He didn't seem like a villain either, especially since it was the hero that had started it first. Not only that, he stopped Katsuki and the others from bullying him. The man smiled as he crouched down to Izuku's eye level. "Don't worry, I won't hurt you. Let's get you patched up." As the man helped Izuku up to his feet, he glanced at Katsuki. Instantly, Katsuki felt something pressing down on him, as if gravity had increased. "Don't tell anyone what happened, and I won't tell the authorities about you abusing your quirk. If it becomes known, then your desire to become a hero will be impossible. I'll make sure of it." Katsuki heard that statement and shivered before realizing Izuku hadn't reacted at all. He was sure if Izuku had heard it, he would have said something, meaning the man had somehow said that statement for him only to hear. "Is it a quirk?" thought Katsuki before dismissing it. The man had stated he was quirkless, so unless he was lying, Katsuki didn't want to think more of it. With that, Katsuki left. "Come on, we don't want to be here when the others find out," said the man as he took Izuku up in his arms before suddenly disappearing from sight. Izuku breathed in and out as everything turned blurry before discovering they were now on the roof of his family's apartment complex, far away from the crime scene. "Don't worry, I won't hurt you," said the man as he gently put Izuku down. Thank you," said Izuku meekly, causing the man to chuckle. "Don't worry, it wasn't much effort," said the man as he rubbed Izuku's hair. "So I hear you want to be a hero. Tell me, why?" Satisfy this one's curiosity. Izuku was silent for a moment, but the man seemed patient as he sat there. Soon, Izuku spilled everything. How he wanted to become a hero to help people, like All Might did. He didn't care too much about being a popular hero, though he wouldn't mind. But he wanted to save people, to bring hope with a smile just like All Might did. While kids his age just wanted to become a hero because it would make them popular or rich, his reason had never changed. But it all came crashing down when he was diagnosed as quirkless. The daycare teachers tried their best to treat him as an equal, but there were some who clearly favored the other children and ignored the freak. "And now, even heroes think I'm worthless," sighed Izuku. "What's the point in living in this society if everyone thinks I'm not human?" "You know that's not true," said the man lightly, though disheartening. "I doubt everyone has the same viewpoint. Your parents love you still, don't they? And I'm sure there are people out there who care for you. But what can I do?" asked Izuku, starting to cry. "Everyone ignores me, even when I try to make other friends. Only Kaken ever bothers to talk to me, even though he's a bully. To be ignored by everyone, or to at least have his existence acknowledged, even as a punching bag," thought the man. "Both are poor choices, but I suppose he does at least want someone to see him." The man hummed as he looked up to the sky. He had been in this world for a few weeks to explore, and already he had discovered some things about this world. He could leave now if he wanted to, but the boy had caught his interest. At that moment, he made his decision. "What's your name?" asked the man before introducing himself. "I'm Young Kai." "Izuku Midoriya," sniffed Izuku as he wiped his eyes. "Well then, Izuku Midoriya, do you want to become a cultivator then?" asked Young Kai. Izuku looked up in confusion before Young Kai stood up fully, letting Izuku see him in his glory as the sun set behind him. "Cultivators, we are destined to go against the heavens. Yet because we defy the heavens, we grow stronger and force the heavens to accept our existence. You said that society rejects you. How about defying them, rising above them all, and becoming a hero that you envision, not what society has set for you?" As Izuku heard this, his heart pounded as he looked up at Young Kai. Suddenly, the man in front of him didn't seem so simple, but rather his existence seemed to grow even bigger. Soon, everything faded away, leaving only darkness, yet Young Kai stood in front of him. Izuku could somehow feel power emanating from Young Kai that defied all logic. "Do you want to become my disciple?" asked Young Kai. Izuku couldn't help but kneel before replying, "Yes, but why me? I mean, Kaken is super." Young Kai interrupted him. "True, he has talent, but he will never be able to cultivate." Izuku blinked in confusion as Young Kai elaborated. "I've discovered that anyone that has a quirk can never cultivate, or at least it will be harder. Not too sure, but maybe it's the trade-off. Being blessed by the heavens and earth, they will never try to surpass it, whereas cultivators go against them. Or maybe it's something else, but I've never gone into it. You can cultivate, I can tell. But most importantly, I've seen your character. You fought because they were bullying another child, intervening on behalf of another. You've never started a fight for no reason. Though you're weaker than others, martial arts and other skills can always be improved upon. One's character, however, is almost impossible to change. Your moral strength surpasses others. Your will exceeds even some that I know. So tell me, Will you become a cultivator and defy the heavens themselves? Izuku couldn't help but shiver before raising his head. As long as it doesn't go against my moral code and against what it means to be a hero, then yes. Yonkai couldn't help but laugh before nodding, promising that he would never force Izuku to do something so evil. While people were not born equal, there was always a chance to surpass others. Several years pass. 12-year-old Izuku was meditating on a piece of rock, taking in the environment as it was. He was sitting in a rather beautiful area with a pond and a small waterfall that fed into it. Near him were some trees that fed into the scenery as well as some flowers. Just down the road from the pond was a villa that Izuku currently lived in by himself. Inko was currently with her husband, traveling along with him. How this came to be was that his master, Yonkai, had managed to save some super-rich businessman's life as well as protect his family. The man was so grateful that he insisted on repaying Yonkai. Although even if Yonkai had done nothing, the man would have lived a crippled life as well as losing half of his family's fortune. Though in honesty, even if he had lost half of his fortune, he was still very rich and could make up the deficit in just a few years. If you hadn't come save my family, then my enemies would have taken half of the fortune and nobody would have helped us. Even the pro-heroes would have turned their backs against us, stating that it wasn't their problem, explained the man. The enemy used loopholes and bribery to strike at my family. The fact you stopped it means everything to me. My daughter might have been harmed, or worse, taken from me. I don't care if you're not a pro-hero, you're my family's savior. Not only that, but the man's grandfather was saved when Yonkai treated his illness with a special treatment and medicine when all modern medicine had proved useless. And so Yonkai decided to ask for a private land to use. He just wanted a place to carve out a teleportation array so he could come and go. And the man responded with this. Though sweat dropping at the gift, Yonkai accepted it, which led to another secret that Izuku learned about his master. That he was technically an alien, though certainly not what Izuku expected. Not only was he from outer space, but possibly another dimension. Yonkai had come to this planet on a whim, and hadn't expected to take a disciple, but since he had, he was going to do it right. So Yonkai made a teleportation array that connected to his own homeworld so he could travel back and forth whenever he wanted to do so. Since Yonkai wouldn't stay there forever, Izuku was made the landlord, with his first job as his disciple to protect and clean up the place, to which he eagerly accepted as he moved in. Yonkai promised to train him, but he did need to travel around the galaxy. This led to another thing. Izuku didn't only have Yonkai as his master, but several others who were friends or allied with Yonkai, with each one of them teaching Izuku every now and then. Inko was, of course, told the truth about everything, who immediately fainted upon hearing the news. All of them reassured Inko that they would take care of Izuku when she finally woke up again, which led to Inko deciding to accompany her husband on his job. The main reason she did so was that they made a special amulet for Inko as well as a tag that allowed her to teleport back home anytime she wanted to, no matter where she was. The tag would serve as a beacon to teleport back to wherever her husband was. That way, she had the time to spend with her two favorite men in the whole world. Hisashi, despite his lack of presence in Izuku's life, always cared for him. It was just his job involved him traveling a lot, and he was very good at his job, making him high in demand. He did remember all important events related to Izuku, such as his birthday and such. Izuku took a deep breath, letting his cultivation run throughout his body. His masters had all been gentle but firm with his training. It was from them that he learned more than just cultivating martial arts, but other branches as well. Need to check on the garden, mumbled Izuku before grabbing a marble that had a diameter of about 35 millimeters. 1 second, he was there, another second, he was gone. The item dropped onto the ground gently. The item that Izuku had been holding was an artifact that had a sealed world inside it. Inside the world was a garden full of mysterious plants that Izuku was in charge of overseeing, with the passage of time accelerated for growing these plants. Of course, it also doubled as a storage artifact for Izuku to put all his supplies inside. Izuku always carried this artifact with him everywhere, hidden in his yellow backpack that he used. It was useful as all he needed to do to retrieve a certain item within the sealed world was thinking about it while his hands were in close proximity of the item. Once he was done checking through, Izuku exited out of the sealed world before hurrying back to his house. It was almost time for his lessons with his teachers, one of the things he looked forward to. Outside, in society, he was quirkless and was shunned by everyone. It didn't help that Katsuki always kept harassing him without getting into trouble. If he tried to respond, then he was always painted in a bad light, as teachers favored Katsuki, thinking with his powerful quirk he could be a hero and wanted to ride on his coattails. So Izuku gave up trying to make friends for the while, knowing none of them would help him. But he wasn't lonely. He had his family, and he had his teachers' families that played with him when they were visiting. Auditorium Middle School. Hey Bakugo, said a kid in the 7th grade classroom, wanna see what Deku is up to? Katsuki Bakugo looked up from his seat, glancing at the extra talking to him. He never bothered learning the names of his classmates, as they were just extras. The only name he technically remembered was Izuku, though he called him Deku since he was quirkless. He was also the only name Katsuki knew how to spell correctly since Deku was derived from writing Izuku's name backward. What for? Snapped Katsuki. He has detention today, grinned the extra, for speaking ill of his betters. Katsuki scoffed at that before looking over to Izuku. Ever since that day, Izuku had stopped hanging out with him. At first, Katsuki thought that Izuku had been kidnapped, only to see him the next day. Then, his thoughts turned to thinking that Izuku was looking down on him, which caused him to get angry. Before Katsuki could do anything though, Izuku ended up moving, which surprised him. His parents went to visit without him, but when they came back, they told him that he was not allowed to play with Izuku anymore. At first, Katsuki thought that Izuku had tattled on him or complained, but his parents were firm that Izuku had not told them anything. Instead, his new friend showed them the truth of Izuku and Katsuki's playtime, and the parents had not been amused. Words had been shouted that night until a compromise finally came to be, to which Katsuki and Izuku were no longer friends, nor talked to each other. Still, as much Katsuki didn't want to admit it, Izuku was quite different now. He was still a quirkless Deku, but he had a backbone now. Sure, he took his detentions without complaint, but Katsuki could see something in his eye, as if plotting something or deciding not to care. As for the detention, it was a bullshit reason. Katsuki saw some other extra had it in his head that he could steal Izuku's food and then make him pay for more food. Izuku ignored him at first, calmly eating his own food when the extra tried to take it. Izuku turned, carrying his lunch tray away from the idiot while eating at a slightly faster pace. The bully tried to catch Izuku, but he kept dodging until he finished eating and put his tray away. The bully may have thought he was doing some sick hero moves, but all Katsuki could see was the bully flailing like an idiot. "Take this," shouted the bully as he finally decided to use his quirk, which allowed him to extend his fingernails slightly longer. They were sharper and more durable than regular fingernails, but not by much. Izuku leaned back, allowing the bully to miss completely once more. The bully overextended himself and tripped, falling forward and coincidentally falling face first right into his own lunch that he hadn't even finished. Before a cry could even be heard, the teacher, who had been watching the whole thing, stood up. "Midoriya," shouted the teacher as he stood up, dropping a red and black book that Katsuki saw the words meta before it flopped over. "What do you think you're doing? Causing trouble for other students and even hurting them. Go stand outside the hall immediately for your insolence." Even though Izuku had done absolutely nothing, the teacher was very biased, especially against Izuku. Izuku didn't say anything, but his glare made it easy to tell he was not amused. Katsuki swore he saw a flash of red as well as something shiny reflecting out of Izuku's pocket, but Izuku had already left. However, the teacher interpreted the glare as Izuku speaking rudely to him, and so assigned detention. Izuku sighed as he sat alone in detention. His homeroom teacher was the most biased person of all times, in his opinion. He always tried to blame everything on him only, despite the fact he had nothing to do with the idiot hurting himself. Not only that, but a good 3/4 of the faculty always looked at him as if he was scum. Izuku had half a mind to blow off the detention, but decided to obey for now. "In detention again," sighed a teacher as he walked into the detention hall. "At least it's Tanaka-sensei today," thought Izuku. He was one of the few teachers who didn't discriminate against his quirkless status. Other teachers kept fudging with his grades, making his marks lower than the ones on whom they had pinned their hopes on becoming heroes so as to ride off their coattails, such as Katsuki. Izuku, of course, wasn't taking this lying down. He had marked every single paper, gathered evidence, and recorded every infraction he had done with a statement saying he disagreed with every single one of them. "Just a few more years," muttered Izuku as he opened up his cell phone before going to a specific website, the UA University website, where he wanted to apply to become a hero. Tanaka ignored whatever Izuku was doing in favor of grading assignments. He was well aware of the hate boner that almost all the staff seemed to have on Izuku, but was too powerless to do anything. Even the principal sided with the majority, deeming it as a necessary evil. So Tanaka decided to do everything he could to at least give Izuku some sort of comfort, volunteering to be the one to monitor Izuku's detention, which seemed to please the others, as they didn't want to be in the same classroom with a quirkless and hopeless student. Katsuki didn't know why or how, but he somehow caved into peer pressure and was now standing in front of gated door with all his classmates except Izuku. "Why am I here again?" questioned Katsuki as his classmates all chatted with each other. "Oh right, Deku." Katsuki looked around, seeing the whole place was gated with signs and saying "Keep out. Private property. Intruders will be persecuted." It was written in kanji, katakana, hiragana, and English, with signs all over the place, making it impossible for someone to have missed it. "Over here," grinned a classmate as his pointed mole-like nose twitched to the ground a little away from the gated door. "We can dig through here. For some reason, only the ground under the entrance is protected and has concrete underneath it." The rest is just dirt. Then let's dig, grinned another student as his hands began to transform into rocky fists before digging. Another student used her quirk that manipulated wind to toss the dirt out while another made soapy water to help soften the dirt. Soon enough, all of them had dug under the gate and past it, clearly trespassing. "Isn't this a bad idea?" asked a chubby male student with antlers like a deer. "PFFT, it's just Deku's place," scoffed another student whose hair could become spikes. "What can that waste of space do? My mom says that people like him are a bane to society and should just die so proper humans can take their place. We're above the law when it comes to people like him." Katsuki twitched at that, wondering if it was a good idea. Sure, he was interested in what the hell Deku had been doing since that meeting with the weird man who punched a hero into the ground. But was this worth it? And those words, they sounded so villain-like. Yay, plus it's not like we'll get in trouble. If anything, Deku will be the one taking the heat no matter what we do, giggled a girl with a bitchy voice, according to Katsuki himself. With everyone in agreement that there would be no consequences, but rather a possible chance to be called heroes, they continued forward. Katsuki followed, wondering why the hell he was following them still. Also another thing, he should be the only one that gets to call Izuku Deku. It was his nickname for him, damn it. Soon, they arrived to see the beautiful scenery. The waterfall gently feeding into the pond with flowers placed tastefully around the area. After taking in the scenery, one jealous classmate decided that Izuku didn't deserve to live in such a nice place, and began leading the others in desecrating the place. The waterfall was pushed and smashed, flowers ripped out and smashed, and several items decorating the place shattered into pieces. Then the pond itself was defiled by the teenagers urinating or defecating. One of them had explosive diarrhea. All the while Katsuki stood there watching, not quite believing what was going on. Was this what heroes did? In Katsuki's mind, heroes won, and that was all. All Might was the ultimate example of that. And not that Katsuki would want to admit, he was one of the biggest fanboys when it came to All Might, only comparable to Izuku. It was that simple for him. But right now, his worldview was being shaken. It had first started when he saw a hero lose against the strange man. Did Izuku deserve all this hate, just for existing? Would All Might approve of such actions? "Come on, Bakugo, join the fun," shouted a student before eyeing the large villa before deciding it needed to be redecorated to be fit for a Deku. Before Katsuki could even respond or say that it wasn't right, or that he wasn't interested, a cold voice rang out. "What the hell are you all doing?" Few minutes prior, Izuku sighed as he made his way back home. Tanaka-sensei had let him go early, knowing his detention was bullshit. Still, he decided to persevere, if not just for now. All the evidence he had gathered would be enough to get out of that school. "Maybe I should have listened to my teachers about homeschooling," mumbled Izuku. One of them offered to march into the school and destroy it himself, but Izuku managed to stop him with one of his more reasonable teachers, the one with deep blue hair. Izuku arrived at the gate, ready to type in the password as well as scan his ID when he noticed something was off. His eyes trailed down the gates before noticing a hole that led underneath the gate and into the private land itself. Crouching down, Izuku noticed a button that was exactly identical to Aldera's school uniform. Izuku's eyes narrowed as he rushed inside through the gate, pondering why the hell the ground wasn't filled with concrete as directed, but more importantly, who had trespassed in. While it took the students about 5 minutes to arrive at the location, Izuku only took 30 seconds. When he arrived, his eyes widened in shock and his heart stopped. The once beautiful scenery had been defiled beyond belief. Izuku could see all the plants had been uprooted, the vases smashed, the waterfall broken, and the once purified pond now filled with feces and piss. All while the students seemed to enjoy doing such acts. "What the hell are you all doing?" roared Izuku, grabbing everyone's attention. At first, the students were all shy and embarrassed, refusing to look at Izuku. However, after the shock of being caught passed, one of the more cocky ones began marching his way towards Izuku, intending to show him just where he belonged. Izuku ignored him, staring straight at Katsuki Bakugo. "Did you lead them all here? Did you plan this?" asked Izuku with a stone-cold voice, looking at the person whom he once called friend. Katsuki hesitated at that moment. He wanted to bluster and say he was the leader, but he didn't want to claim credit for this. He hadn't even done anything, still too shocked at what was going on. "Piss off. You don't deserve to talk to him," stated a lackey with a stretchy neck. "Unlike you, he's going to go far. But don't worry, you can make it up to us all for being such a waste of space." "Yeah, first, beg for forgiveness," scoffed a girl, following the hype train. "Then, pay for our lunches. You can be our little gopher. It's the least you can do for polluting our space," said another. "And finally, you're going to be our punching bag so we can show the world that we can be heroes, while you can be the little weakling villain," said another one as his body expanded into a muscular stature. Izuku took a deep breath as almost all of the boys in the class surrounded him with leering grins, along with some of the girls joining in. Katsuki was still standing away from them when he noticed Izuku taking a deep breath. Despite their differences, Katsuki had been friends with Izuku since they were baby, so he was aware of the various ranges of Izuku's emotion. He was mostly defaulted to crybaby or happy, and almost never anger. But when Izuku opened his eyes, Katsuki could see the flames of anger burning within him, an emotion that Katsuki was most familiar with himself, but most foreign to when it came to Izuku. Looks like my teachers were right, muttered Izuku to himself. Sometimes, the strong are the ones who control the laws. Strength is everything. Tang sect mysterious heaven treasure principle. One cannot forever pretend to be a pig to eat a tiger, otherwise one can really become a pig to the slaughter. The line rang through his mind, hearing his teacher's voice reciting it to him. One of the students was tired of waiting, and so tried to punch him with his rocky fists, intending on teaching Izuku a lesson. It was at this moment that they fucked up. Izuku parried that punch, guiding it away from him before countering with a right straight to the face towards his attacker. This won't hurt a bit. He's Quirkle, thought the student, only to have his thoughts interrupted and silenced as Izuku's punch landed, sending an explosion of pain up the boy's brain before falling unconscious. Just because Izuku was quirkless didn't mean he was powerless, especially after being trained by some of the strongest cultivators, which included body tempering among other skills. He was considered at Kai Transformation, or Gushing Spring, or Profound Realm. But for the sake of simplifying everything, as each of his cultivator teachers had different names for a certain stage, he adopted one of the simpler ones. The ranking he used had none: bronze, silver, gold, platinum, and diamond, with each ranking separated by 5 ranks in ascending order. There was more after, but his teachers had him focus on those. It was only after completing diamond was he able to accompany them outside the world. He was able to use Kai to layer over his body, and thus was a silver rank 4. Time seemed to freeze as everyone witnessed the boy with rocks for hair and could use his quirk to create rock fists falling unconscious. "Get him!" screamed one of them, which caused everyone to attack. Despite Izuku's best effort to not emulate his master's words that was rather cringy and corny in this era, some of them couldn't help but slip into his own vocabulary. "Courting death," sneered Izuku as he quickly weaved his way through, using complicated footwork to get out of the encirclement. "I got him," shouted the student with a stretchy neck, only for Izuku to grab his vulnerable neck and squeeze. "Can't breathe." Izuku tossed him into the defiled pond without much thought, ducking under another student's amateur punch. The student had used his quirk to bulk himself up to give him extra strength, but at the cost of speed and accuracy as well as a proper punching form. Izuku kicked him hard at where the kidney and lumbar spine were located. The student went down wheezing as he let go of his quirk due to pain. "Die!" screamed a student, his quirk allowing him to turn his hair into sharp spikes on the top of his head. At this point, he didn't care if he killed Izuku, so he lowered his head and charged forward like a bull, unable to really see his target other than remember where he was. Izuku flexed his wrist before pointing his left arm towards the charging student, all while using his right hand to grab the skull of another student trying to bite him with his sharp teeth. With just a clench of his fist, 2 shiny objects flashed through the air that originated from Izuku's sleeve. The 2 objects slammed into the charging student's skull, who hadn't seen the attack due to his lack of vision from his charge. "Arg!" cried the student as he crouched down in pain, rubbing the top of his head. He didn't see Izuku hurling the biting student towards him, sending them both flying towards the pond, right into the other student trying to get up. Katsuki stood at the side, watching everything that was happening. While concerned about the fact that some of the extras were actually trying to go for the kill, he was more shocked at the fact Izuku was kicking ass. Sure, the extra was able to get a hit now and then, but nothing that couldn't be shrugged off. Izuku, however, wasn't holding back, even against girls. One of the girls tried to choke Izuku with her long blue hair, but Izuku yanked her hair towards him before knocking her out with a brutal lariat. As if it wasn't enough, he started swinging her like a flail, knocking out several other students, including one whose quirk allowed him to glow in the dark, and nothing else. Also last place in their fitness test and academics, too. How he was supposed to be a better hero potential than Izuku was a wonder in itself. The student never applied himself, believing his quirk would allow him to coast through life. Katsuki watched Izuku finish up the last one with a sickening crack as he dislocated a leg. All the male students were down, and the female students who had fought were crying in pain. Only he and 3 other female students, who had been too frightened to even join, were unhurt. Katsuki's mind was arguing with one another. On one hand, he was thinking that Izuku was looking down on him all this time, but his more rational mind finally kicked in. Ever since that incident, the two had never met up anymore, so there was no reason for Izuku to tell him. But the quirkless kid that Katsuki had never deemed to be anything but a pebble was now a huge mountain. "Deck," began Katsuki, only for a gasp to suddenly ring out. "What happened here?" shrieked Outinko, having gotten out of the basement after teleporting back to spend time with Izuku. Her eyes bulged when she took in the view. The beautiful scenery was desecrated, her plants destroyed, and the once clear tranquil pond full of shit. Inko's eyes locked onto Katsuki. "Did you do this?" hissed Inko in a cold tone that caused Katsuki to shiver. "Did you lead them here?" "No, auntie," responded Katsuki immediately. As much as he kept calling Izuku a Deku, he had nothing but respect for Inko, the kind woman who didn't have a bone of malice in her. Or so he thought. It wasn't Inko's fault for making the assumption. Out of everyone in the area, only Katsuki would technically know where they lived now, as Izuku never brought friends home. "I think one of the other students followed me home," said Izuku, defending Katsuki from suspicion, even if it wasn't his intention. "They dug a hole underneath the fence to slip in." "That shouldn't have been possible," frowned Inko. "The whole area should have been lined with concrete underneath the gates unless they dug really deep past it." Still, there were injured students who had trespassed on private lands and destruction of property, so Inko called in the police and the hospital. It didn't take long for the students to be escorted out of the premises while a damage assessment was made. However, the fact a quirkless student had annihilated 25 other students with quirks was an insult to them, especially ones with families that religiously followed a certain policy or had ties to the hidden army of MLA. And so it wasn't long for 28 families to gather together to sue the Midoriya family for excess violence and whatever they could tack on. Meanwhile, back at the Bakugo household, slap, Katsuki could only be stunned, unable to even move his neck back to normal as he had received a slap from his father, Masaru. Katsuki was used to his mother, Mitsuki, punching him on the head, punting him across the room, or hurling him to the floor. It was their way of showing affection. Somehow, however, Masaru had never done such a thing, always leaving it to Mitsuki for that punishment. Yet somehow, it hurt him a lot more than he thought. "Do you know why I'm mad?" asked Masaru. Katsuki remained silent, unable to speak. Mitsuki was the one serving tea between the both of them, a rare sight indeed. "We were aware that after you gained your quirk and Izuku didn't, the two of you drifted apart. Of course, when we found out you had been bullying literally your childhood friend since your birth, we were not pleased. But Izuku pleaded with us that since you were just a child and were playing around and to let it go. So we did, under a few circumstances," said Masaru slowly. "But Inko has always treated you kindly, has she not?" Katsuki stiffly nodded his head. He could remember the times that she had helped him despite not being on good terms with Izuku, sometimes giving him gifts from other countries, even if by proxy from his mom. "So why would you stand aside and do nothing when all those students decided it was all right to violate private property like that?" asked Masaru. "Why didn't you tell them not to, or call the police, or even us? When did the headstrong boy who always wanted to be the leader suddenly become a follower?" Katsuki bristled at that comment before pondering that himself. Why did he go along with everyone? Before Masaru could continue, Mitsuki interrupted the lecture. "Masaru, something's happening. I got a call from the Yubai family. They're all gathering up to sue Izuku for slander and whatever they can tack on. And from the sounds of it, they're confident they can win," said Mitsuki. Masaru frowned at that. In his perspective, it was a clear-cut case. The students had trespassed on private property. And not only that, vandalized the place with clear intent. Even if Izuku could be hit with excessive violence, it was all in the name of self-defense, as it was clear who had thrown the first punch. There were recordings of the whole fight. Not to mention the students broke the quirk restriction law while Izuku, who was quirkless, did not. The fact that they were confident in winning meant they had plans in place that would make it go their way. "Get the court date," ordered Masaru. "We're going to show up, but not in support of them, but the Midoriya family." "Katsuki, can you testify what happened?" "Yay," nodded Katsuki, shaking his head to clear it up. "I can do that. It was the stupid extra's fault for breaking into Auntie Inko's place." 2 weeks later, suspiciously, for a case that was filed so recently, it was slammed through the system with a court date set. Not only that, but the lawyer the Midoriya family had called in was unable to come due to an accident. And so they had been given a court lawyer by the judge, who looked uninterested in the whole proceeding. Not only that, it was a criminal court. Still, the Midoriya family had all their evidence ready. Even Hisashi had come back for this, pushing all his work aside for this. Though his boss was unhappy and threatened Hisashi, he pushed back. Hisashi was too valuable to lose, so the boss could only reluctantly back off. "All rise for the judge," stated the bailiff, clearly giving Izuku a sneer. Soon, what was obviously a rigged trial began. The 28 families all gave tearful testimonies of their innocent child being lured by Izuku to a trap and other bullshit stories. As they finally finished their story, Inko and Hisashi tried to bring up their side, only to be sabotaged by their own lawyer, saying they had no defense and to proceed with the ruling. Ignoring their obviously sabotaged lawyer, Inko and Hisashi tried to bring up the facts that the children had trespassed on private property, damaged said property, and tried to hurt Izuku and attacked first, allowing Izuku to react in self-defense, not to mention breaking the quirk restriction laws and the fact the children actually tried to kill Izuku. Objection, stated the opposing lawyer representing the 28 families without even stating the reason for the objection. Sustained, said the judge. This evidence cannot be used in this trial. What? Shouted Mitsuki from behind. That's bullshit. You can't just do that. Silence, or you will be held in contempt, said the judge harshly. Now I've seen all I needed to see. It's clear that these 28 children were innocent while this devil-incarnate villain clearly attacked them, perhaps due to jealousy over his current state. The Midoriya family will have to pay compensation to all 28 families, and Izuku Midoriya will be sentenced to juvenile hall until he is 18, where he will be transferred to a prison for scum like him for 10 more years. The plan was to send Izuku into a juvenile hall near Deku City, where a certain army had complete autonomous control over the center, where they could rectify a mistake that should have been made a long time ago. Show him where he truly belonged, either under the new generation, the true humans, or in a volcano where all traces of his existence would disappear. Izuku felt his fists clench in anger at this injustice being carried out, all because he was quirkless. He saw the students laughing, sneering, taunting, and making rude gestures at him, with the parents having no concern for such behavior or even joining them. It was their right to lord over a past relic that should have died long ago, according to their own thoughts. If I'm going to be a villain, then I'll make sure Before the judge finished carrying out the sentence, before Izuku could finish his thoughts, the locked doors leading into the courtroom suddenly burst open. Everyone turned towards the door, some about to raise their voice at the rudeness before stopping in silence. How could they not, when one of the most elegant male species they had ever witnessed stepped into the room? Everything about him spoke of elegance. His aura spoke of confidence. His gentle steps, his flowing royal azure blue hair that despite being tied up, and his blue clothes looked like they had been made from the finest tailors and materials. Who are you? Bristled the judge in anger. Master, greeted Izuku hurriedly, only for the man to smile as he gently lifted him up. I came when I heard what was going on, said the man. You are one of my disciples, as well member of the Tang sect. If I didn't come to deal with this injustice, what sort of sect master would I be? The man turned around to the judge. My name is Tang-san. I'm one of Izuku's masters, and here to implore you to see the truth of your actions and to clear your eyes. Seeing how softly Tang-san seemed to speak, the judge regained his bluster before sneering. What is there to see? My eyes are clear. The brat clearly manipulated and hurt those other children with trickery and underhanded methods with a clear villainous motive. If anything, my sentencing was too light. Instead, I sentence Izuku Midoriya to life in a maximum prison without parole, and will push for the death sentence. This case is over. The judge went to slam his gavel onto the sound block, only to find his gavel's momentum halted by Tang-san's hand. When did he thought the judge before freezing up? The one soft, gentle eyes of Tang-san suddenly turned fierce. In the judge's view, he felt like he was now standing before a god facing judgment, and it wasn't favorable. More specifically, a god of slaughter. The door from the side of the court suddenly opened up, with a rather strict-looking judge walking in with a third eye on his forehead. Who dares interrupt my judge? Began the judge, only to freeze when he saw who entered. In terms of ranking, he was just a mere junior magistrate, while the one who walked in was chief magistrate, someone who far outranked him. I heard everything that was going on. You're a disgrace to the justice system. Bailiff, get him out of that chair. I'll be taking over this case, and send him to detention hall. We'll decide how to deal with him later, said the older judge. The other judge was quickly kicked out, along with the previous bailiff, before a retrial was quickly taken. I'm not sure why or how this case was rushed through with such pathetic attempts. I will overhear and judge fairly, said the judge sternly. I am Chief Magistrate Tadasuke. Just as he said that, a team of lawyers suddenly walked in from the entrance of the court, each one wearing expensive suits and Rolex watches. We will be representing the Midoriya family in this case, stated the lead lawyer. Hey, wait, I'm the court-assigned lawyer for this. You can't just take over. I'm handling this case, blustered the other lawyer, only to get a glare from the lead lawyer. What's your name? Barked another lawyer. Your license? Bar ID. We saw your rather apathetic handling in this case. Where is your professionalism? Don't answer. I'll make sure you never practice law again. This isn't going as planned, hissed one of the mothers to the lawyers representing them. Don't worry, we can handle this, said the opposing lawyer, albeit slightly nervous. That nervousness sank into despair when the defense lawyer lifted his suitcase onto the table to reveal to them a personalized logo with a stylized Y that belonged to one company only, followed by the Roman numeral 1. Detnerat was a rich company in Japan. But that was only within Japan. Sure, nationally, they were considered the richest. However, compared to multinational companies, they were still at the bottom of the rankings. The Yaoyorozu was one such company that far outstripped them. While he may work with Detnerat as their lawyer, he was not their best lawyer. The reason he had been chosen was to still keep a low profile. Not to mention the case should have been an easy one. He was largely out of his league against the Yaoyorozu defense team, especially against their best ones. The Yaoyorozu lawyers had 5 different teams, Each one ranked differently, with one being the best while 5 were the weakest, but even their weakest team could slaughter him. And now he was being placed against the best of the best. The lawyer felt his soul leaving as the team of lawyers all turned to glare at him, as if ready to eat him alive. And eat him alive, they did. With the retrial underway, along with the mountain of evidence the previous judge had dismissed as irrelevant, it was a one-sided slaughter. As Izuku looked around, he noticed someone poking his head out from the side door. Taking a better look, he saw a face with orange hair and blue eyes giving a wink before pulling back. Izuku could only smile. Out of his masters, that particular one was the most cunning and vicious in revenge. Looks like this is coming to an end, noted Tang-san as the final verdict was announced, with the Midoriya family coming out on top before standing up. If I may, suggested Tang-san as the judge was about to announce the sentencing. While they did do some rather harsh acts, they are still children. As seen, there was a lot of property damage that needs to be fixed. So instead of paying the full amount owed for the destruction of the property, we can cut it in half if they are willing to work to help renovate the land. It can be counted towards community service, and if applicable, training. We can start as early as tomorrow. The judge hummed for a second before glancing at the Midoriya family, asking if they were all right with this suggestion. While Hisashi wanted to incinerate them all for everything that had happened, he decided to keep his mouth shut, afraid his next words could potentially spit fire from anger. It was Inko who took over and nodded in agreement. Then all 28 children will work to help renovate the lands. And they will have to pay 3 divided by 4ths of the reparations fee, declared Judge Tadasuke. I feel like a half would be too lenient. This case is over. With a loud bang, Tadasuke ended the case. Inko, Hisashi, said Masaru as the Bakugo family quickly approached them. My wife and I apologize for Katsuki's behavior. You can expect him to participate in helping renovate the lands. Even if he didn't do anything, he stood by doing nothing, which is just as bad. You may use him for as long as it's needed. The trio bowed in apology, though Mitsuki forced Katsuki to lower his head more when he didn't seem to bow low enough, and then lightly hitting his head when he wasn't saying anything. I'm sorry, apologized Katsuki, which was probably one of the hardest things to do with his own personality. I should have done something. I don't know why, but I followed them like a damn sheep. I'll work hard to help fix everything. While the Bakugo family was apologizing, Tang-sen couldn't help but notice the other 28 families were still giving them sneers as they passed, not even offering an apology. Another had a smirk, as if the sentence they had been given wouldn't go through. It seems like we will have to do something about that, thought Tang-san. Funny, even across worlds and dimensions, you still encounter people who think their lineage or whatever ego they have makes them above others. Now then, while we have the chance, we need to do something about the fence, said the lead lawyer as he adjusted his glasses. The patriarch has told me he is ashamed that such a thing has happened and has promised to find a new company that will comply with all standards that have been set, not skimp over in order to finish the project faster. I might have a company in mind, hummed Hisashi after drinking copious amounts of water. They're a little slow, but they do excellent work. Think it started with a U, it's like Urara. Urara something. And that is the standard that we should look for, commented Tang-san. Go ahead with it. I will contact young Kai about this. Next day, Izuku sighed as he looked out to the pond. There was a lot of work to be done, even after removing all the shit and draining out the water. It was good for training, he supposed. Looking behind him, all he saw was Katsuki, Bakugo, and one other female student. And nobody else. The missing students hadn't even offered any excuse, just sneered and walked away. Though it was an improvement, as they ignored him now. Even though the homeroom teacher had been informed about the punishment, he did nothing to enforce it, just giving Izuku a glare. What the hell, where is everybody? Cursed Katsuki. It was a unanimous vote. Everyone said they wouldn't do it. It was below them, stammered the girl nervously, and their parents agreed and even said they wouldn't pay a cent. That the case wasn't legitimate. They're looking to appeal and sound confident. Then why are you here? Asked Katsuki bluntly. My family decided it would be safer to serve the sentence, mumbled the girl. While shocked at the blatant disrespect, Izuku sighed as his masters had told them that this would most likely happen, though they had promised they would take care of that. Then we'll just start with the 3 of us. We have a lot of work to do, said Izuku. 2 weeks later, we'll kill him, shouted a voice inside a room. Inside an abandoned warehouse, members of the 28 families gathered inside, though none of the children. It was comprised of adults only, who were related to someone in those families one way or another, with all of them idolizing the Meta Liberation Army book like a religious text. Each one of them believed in the MLA creed, and believed that they shouldn't have to pay up because some uppity quirkless bug, whom they didn't even consider a human being, complained. We should torture him first, make him see why he should have taken what happened as a blessing instead, giggled another member. I'll make him eat shit, shouted another member. I had diarrhea, and even then it'll be too good for him. What about the parents? Asked another. What about them? Scoffed a male, who was sharpening his fingers. They should thank us for getting rid of that scum. And if they aren't, then they are freak lovers who should be killed. We are the true path to the future. Those relics shouldn't exist anymore. He can just blame himself for not getting a quirk like a normal person. Seems like you all haven't learned your lesson, chuckled a voice that rang throughout the room. Everyone turned toward the source of the voice to see Yonkai leaning back against the closed entrance door. Who are you? Hissed the crowd as they took fighting positions. One of the masters of the boy you intend to kill, said Yonkai without worry. He's rather naive to believe in the best of people as well as the law, but it's certainly a refreshing outlook. This world is rather more organized than what I'm used to, I admit, but in the end, the world is still the same. Arrogant assholes who think the power they have is enough to lord over others. Quite embarrassing, really, seeing just how little you all have. They all bristled in fury before one of them with a rather hulking figure stepped forward, towering over Yonkai. Who do you think you are? Demanded the man. Do you know who I am? I'm a soldier of the MLA. I've killed dozens of people like you who think the law will protect them. Newsflash, the strong devour the weak, and since I'm strong, I can kill whomever I want with my quirk, including you. The boasting of an ant, yawned Yonkai. While it's certainly a dog-eat-dog universe out there, one needs to know whom one is barking against, otherwise they court death. Death. I'll show you what it means right now, shouted the man as his hand began to emit radiation. The others began to cheer him on. Looks like someone is indeed courting death, along with the rest of you, sighed Yonkai as he raised his hand. Allow this king to teach you all a lesson, since you all clearly don't know how to write the word death. Before the man could react, Yonkai slapped him in the face. The man couldn't really react, as he died instantly from the slap. His neck spun around, snapping his spine, but his body twisted and contorted far past his limits until he finally flew up into the middle of the opposing wall. Before gravity could take hold of the dead man, Yonkai snapped his finger, which caused the man's body to suddenly inflate before he burst open like a balloon. The blood splattered purely against the wall, where the people could see not a splotch of blood, but rather a word traced out with the man's blood and guts. See. Everyone stared at that bloodstained wall for a second before freaking out, trying to escape. The man had casually slapped their strongest fighter and killed him without a thought. Not only that, but his blood had been used to write that word. They began rushing towards the exit on the opposite side of Yonkai, only to see Tang Sen already standing there. It's a moonless, windy night, isn't it? Questioned Tang Sen as a cloud floated over the top floor windows, shadowing his figure. But all they could see were those normally blue eyes turning red, filled with killing intent, perfect for killing. One of the men in the middle held up his arm, ready to blast his way out. It didn't matter that there were his own allies blocking his way. He just wanted to kill and escape. Before his transformed arm could fire, two knives found their way through his brain and throat. How? The man could only think as the knives had somehow hit him without hitting anyone else. To anyone who was a resident of this specific planet, all they had seen was two flashes of light shooting forward, weaving through the crowd before finding their mark. The windows to the side. We can escape there, shouted another as she rushed to the nearest window, only to see another man waiting there, this one with orange hair. Get out of the way, shouted the woman hysterically as her hair turned to spikes to impale him. The man merely raised an eyebrow before lifting his hand up towards the charging woman. The woman instantly felt something change, as if gravity had increased in her area. She ended up collapsing onto the ground. Unfortunately for her hardened hair spikes broke against the floor, rebounding and piercing her heart. At this point, many of them were starting to freak out, especially when the orange-haired man began to float into the air. Then, with a humph, wings sprouted out from behind the man. The people could only gaze in fear and awe at the man, with his right wing black and his left wing white. It was like seeing a heavenly being descending upon them to inflict judgment. They began to beg for their life, wishing to escape this nightmare. You all brought this on yourselves, said the winged man. You targeted our disciple, and even when you were given a second chance, you chose death. So it's only fair we educate you all what it means. Always one for the dramatics, aren't you, Nai? Chuckled Yonkai, who's the one who used a person's body to write that word. Reposted Nai with a chuckle. That's enough. We should end this now, said Tang Sen, though a show of theatrics would be welcome, if not to show these people their mistakes. The crowd shivered in fear as a change seemed to overtake the other two. They wet their pants when Tang Sen suddenly grew eerie metal-looking spider legs from his back while Yonkai seemed to transform into a dragon hybrid, though those sharp-looking claws looked like they could easily tear through them. It would take days before people would discover that the people who had gathered in the warehouse had gone missing. Izuku sighed as he wrote in his notebook, ignoring his teacher's version of history, going over before dawn of quirks of how the quirkless people were barbarian and lesser humans, firing jabbing remarks at Izuku. If that was true, why aren't we exploring space? Thought Izuku to himself. His masters were already traveling through the stars, and they were technically quirkless. Also, the teacher might have forgotten to mention that before the dawn of quirks, the quirkless humans had managed to travel to the moon. And yet 200 years later, there had been no advancement in space travel. The rise of quirks had stopped that for certain. Some people claimed that if it hadn't been for quirks, they as a civilization would have already been traveling through the stars. Not to mention they were still using technology that was almost the same as the 21st century despite being in the 22nd century. Barely any real advancement in technology. All because all research was being funneled into studying quirks. Izuku understood why, but to make it sound like all their current technology was only because those who had quirks had invented them, ignoring all the famous advancements, like being able to utilize electricity, were all quirkless people. And thus, we, for the most part, the Homo superiors, began to lead the world into true peace, unlike the Homo sapiens, the quirkless barbarians, stated the teacher. Remember, this will be on the test. Izuku, along with Katsuki, ignored him. They knew damn well that despite their teacher's radical view, putting such views in their tests when they applied to UA University was a red flag that would ensure they would be kicked out, if not black-marked. As the bell rang, Izuku put his stuff away, ignoring his teacher's glare as he walked out. However, before leaving, he turned around to look at his classmates, the same classmates that had defiled his home, and were now ignoring the punishment that had been laid out for them. It had been 2 weeks and a day already. And though the students left him alone for the most part, almost all of them still sneered and taunted Izuku, though behind his back now. As you all know, began Izuku, clearing his throat as he caught all their attention. It's been 2 weeks since the court date, and out of the people who have come to actually do community service, only 2 students out of the other 29 students have come. The rest of you have blatantly ignored it despite the judge's ruling. As for the payment plan that has been set up, again, only 2 families have followed through with the first payments while the rest of you have ignored it, despite all the phone calls, emails, and mail. Please be warned that if you and your family do not follow through, the punishment for ignoring all of it will be quite harsh. After all, as the teacher said, we live in a society of law, not barbarians like the past, right? The teacher growled at his message being thrown at his face while the other students ignored Izuku's warning. They had been repeatedly told by their parents and their teachers that there was nothing to worry about, that a quirkless freak had no power over them. The rules were there to protect them, not a quirkless person. They had no such rights. Some of the students were wondering where some of their relatives, or in some cases, mother or father, were at. They had been the ones most vocal against Izuku and his family after all, only to suddenly disappear. They had promised to come back in a week and a half, promising everything would be fine, only to never return. At the warehouse, the police, along with some pro-heroes, had quarantined the whole warehouse. The reason was that it was a bloodbath inside. It had been first discovered by a security guard, who had just been doing his rounds when he noticed the lights flickering inside that specific warehouse. The man opened the door to see all the gore covering the floor, walls, and ceiling. It was like seeing a horror movie scene, except it was real. The intense stench of blood made the man quickly run away before vomiting on the floor. It took the man several attempts to dial 110 for the police. Despite the man's warning, the dispatch only sent 1 police car to the warehouse. The 2 officers walked up to where the guard had pointed at, only to stop as they surveyed the area. The newbie instantly ran away to vomit while the more experienced one, with a grizzly bear face, merely took in everything before heading to the police car. Dispatch, we're going to need a lot more people here. Get forensics out here immediately, along with some pro-heroes if they're nearby, stated the veteran. It was only after he did so did he throw up. He had managed to push it away long enough to call for backup. Geez, what the hell happened here? Muttered a forensic scientist as she and the others were trying to find some sort of evidence or blood sample to identify the victims. It was rather difficult, considering the blood was cross-contaminated with other blood and whatever else that was on the ground. Meanwhile, detectives were trying to figure out why such a thing happened. However, it was hard to paint a picture without knowing what the hell happened before. The only obvious thing was that a fight had happened, but the fact all the victims were torn to shreds without leaving an intact body was troubling. Some of the pro-heroes who arrived made a point to make a loud announcement that they were here, posturing while doing so, before stating they would solve the case. Those specific heroes took one look inside the room before running away to barf up their food. Endeavor was one of the heroes who arrived at the scene later, his eyebrows raising at some pro-heroes vomiting their stomachs out. Weak stomachs, commented one of Endeavor's sidekicks. Stay outside, ordered Endeavor, surprising his sidekicks, but they did as ordered. Endeavor walked in before blinking, taking in everything in sight. After seeing everything, he didn't blame the ones with weak stomachs for barfing at the scene. It certainly took some iron will to be able to stomach what was seen. How long ago was this? Asked Endeavor. We're not sure, but we think around midnight, replied an office. It's hard to identify the victims with everything being so contaminated with each other. Then what about that? Asked Endeavor, pointing to a specific wall that had a certain character on it. See. Oh, that, said the officer. We're not too sure, but we think it might have been a cult insignia that they painted on to represent death or something. Take a sample of that, ordered Endeavor. When the officer looked at Endeavor with a questioning look, he continued, that's not paint. That's human blood. Even if it isn't, there's no risk in taking a sample. From the looks of it, that's the only one that's not contaminated with other blood. The officer saluted before quickly ordering the forensic team to get a blood sample off the wall. Endeavor took in the scene before pondering just who could do such a thing, and how powerful were they. Was it another villain trying to make a name, or perhaps a vigilante who decided to take a darker path of justice? Meanwhile, at a distance, Nai, Yongkai, and Tang Sen stood there, looking over their handiwork. Killing all those ants had been child's play, even if they had lowered their own power levels by a lot. Well, that takes care of that, smirked Nai. Ah, but don't forget, some ants just don't learn even if you slap their face. Sometimes you have to go deeper, reminded Yongkai. Those brats still haven't reported in, according to Izuku. Some people really can't see a chance even if you rub it in their face. Those who refuse a toast must be forced to drink a forfeit, sighed Tang-san. If they don't want to grab the chance given, then they can only be punished. Izuku is already gathering his proof against the school, right? Asked Nai. Good brat knows that one can't be nice to everyone all the time. Hopefully he really takes in my principle, grinned Yongkai. Those who respect me 1 step, I respect 10 steps. Those that wronged me once, I beat 3 times. The school has been wronging him ever since he stepped in there just because he's quirkless. Stupid fools don't understand what it means to have actual power. While I don't mind our student being ruthless, I hope he can also temper himself. Not everyone in that school deserves to burn. Izuku does mention a teacher who always tries to help him, said Tang-san. If he can't differentiate good from bad, then it will be troublesome. If Izuku had to rate his teachers, he would say that Nai was the most cunning, Yongkai was the most ruthless, and Tang-san was the most sophisticated, well-tempered. Each one he respected a lot though, as they changed his life. Well, once Izuku finishes dealing with that school, I think he should be homeschooled for a bit, hummed Yongkai. Even if he went to a different school, there's a chance he might have to deal with the same shit. I'm sure the Yaoyorozu family would be eager to do so if I requested it. It would also give Izuku more time to cultivate. You're just saying that because you want our disciple to get together with their daughter, laughed Nai. Yongkai shrugged. Well, the patriarch and matriarch both insisted that their daughter be able to meet our disciple in a more formal setting as thanks for saving their lives. Though if the daughter grows up to be anything like her mother, then our disciple will be quite lucky. True, but you never know if there is somebody else, said Nai, wagging his finger. From what I remember, there used to be a fiery orange-haired girl who spent time with our disciple before she had to move. She seemed very attracted to him. Who knows, if they get back together there might be some competition. Or he can do like we did, and marry them both, laughed Yongkai, Nai following suit. After all, strong men attract women. Perhaps our disciple will not follow your polyamorous harem ways and establish just a single wife, like I did, coughed Tang-san. The 2 other cultivation masters just gave Tang-san a deadpan stare, causing him to slightly flinch at that What? Asked Tang-san. We know that you have a wife, but don't bullshit on having another lover, declared Nai. Bullshit? How would I do that? You 2 have met my wife. You think I'd take another lover behind her back? Said Tang-san aghast. I'm not like you 2, especially you Yongkai. I've heard stories about you from my wife when she talks to your wives. Yongkai could only whistle as he looked away, but Nai pushed on. Oh, while it's true you officially only have a wife, care to explain why Kai and Rengsu's kid looks like yours? She looks nothing like me, stated Tang-san. Oh sure, she's a carbon copy of her mother, except the eye shape and colors suspiciously look like yours, teased Nai. Not to mention she always seems to glance at you at every chance. And what about Juliana? No comment, replied Tang-san, turning around and walking away to signify this talk was over. You walking away just tells us we're right, shouted Yongkai, but was ignored. He really should let up, shrugged Nai, though I admit I was hesitant about taking another wife after Yizian, but it kind of rolled off there, especially with Xiao Ninger. I was lucky Yizian was understanding. Then the ball kept rolling with Yangzin, Yuyan, Xiao Yu, and Long Yuan, though that last one was kind of forced. In the end, you made your women happy, like I did, shrugged Yongkai. We should head back anyways. They might be looking for us. The duo disappeared from view, and nobody even noticed them. The Uraraka family, construction workers, owners were nervous as they approached the gate leading to Izuku's residence. How could they not be nervous? At one moment, they were trying to figure out how to save money to fund their daughter's wish to become a hero while having a business that was slowly failing. And then next an offer of a lifetime appeared. A full-scale remodeling of property belonging to the Yaoyorozu family. And not just a branch of the said family, but the main family. The payoff from completing the job would help the family and business immensely, bringing them out of the red. But if they did it well, the prestige and recommendation from said family could bring them more work in the future. However, they were nervous, afraid there may be some hidden meaning behind this. After all, they weren't the fastest construction company, nor could they boast the best. They certainly did quality work, strictly following every guideline outlined on construction, but it wasn't enough. Other companies skimped out on some by utilizing quirks to build faster. But with fights breaking out every other day or so, nobody could tell if a building's integrity had been compromised, since usually the heroes or villains smashed through them all. Yes, they could probably gain more money if they loosened up on guidelines, but they didn't want to forsake their own morality for monetary gains. What if they won our daughter? Whispered Mrs. Hana Uraraka. I've heard rich playboys will demand girls only to throw them away when they're done. You watch too much drama, whispered Mr. Taka Uraraka, though he couldn't push that thought away. If they do, then we refuse. I won't sell out our daughter just for money. The two parents could only glance back to their daughter, Ochako Uraraka, who had accompanied them to this business meeting. While they had wanted to leave her home, there was nobody to watch over her, as their neighbors, friends were all busy, and they didn't feel comfortable leaving her at home alone. They had no idea how long the meeting would take. They soon arrived at the house to see 4 teenagers working on the pond, with the male teenager with spiky hair cursing every so often. The family observed them digging the dirt out, tossing them into a trash bag that was promptly tossed into an area to remove later. While curious about why, their question was derailed when the patriarch of the Yaorazu family greeted them personally. Hello, greeted Hotaru Yaorazu. I'm pleased to see you could make it. We're honored to be here, stammered Taka slightly. You said you were interested in remodeling this land and the security around it. Could you clarify about that a little more? Of course, nodded Hotaru, before gesturing to the land before them, but a little introduction may be in order. As you can see, the land is a mess, but that fault lies within those families who think they can do whatever they want without punishment. Here is a photo of what the land was like before, and the aftermath after those students decided it was okay to desecrate this land. Taka and Hana both looked at the photos while their daughter decided to join the other teenagers out of curiosity. Holy crap, muttered Taka as he saw the aftermath photos. Why would teenagers do this? It was a disaster area, especially when he saw the clear pond water riddled with piss and feces. Inflated sense of ego, said Hotaru curtly, especially since they refused the generous terms given to them for reparation. I'll be making sure they pay for this disrespect. Hotaru took a deep breath before continuing. This land is actually a gift to my benefactor, who not only saved my life, but helped my family from our enemies. Naturally, we wanted to repay him for his services. The boy with green hair you see outside is his disciple as well as the landowner. My daughter, Momo, wanted to accompany me today to spend some time with me, and when she saw this, she took the initiative to help out, saying it would help her hero training. Hotaru pointed out to where his daughter was, who had her hair tied up as she helped lift up a boulder with the green-haired boy. She wants to be a hero, questioned Hana. Surprise, right, chuckled Hotaru, but she has her heart set, though the man who saved my family probably had some influence on her. But let's focus on the details. Hana and Taka studied the blueprints for a while before they mentally began calculating the costs. It would not be an easy job for sure, considering what they were asking. Not only were they helping restructure the land, but they were also going to inspect the gate around the area as well as to ensure that cement blocks had been placed under the fence. Apparently, they had found a hole and were worried there were more leaks. Being honest, this is going to be quite expensive, started Taka with a warning tone before giving an estimate. Price is no objection, said Hotaru swiftly. I want the best work done with quality materials. That can be arranged, said Hana, but the time it will take will be. Hotaru interrupted them. I'm not picky about the time frame either. Your company was recommended because of your stellar quality work. I want you to bring that to this land. The wife and husband glanced at each other, sending secret messages via facial expressions before turning back to Hotaru. We can do that. Is there anything else? Asked Taka. When Hotaru said no, the couple was relieved that their little fear of their only daughter being bought was only just a nightmare. Then we'll get to inspecting now, said Taka. Which one do you want us to do first? The gate areas, replied Hotaru. The land development can wait until later. I want to make sure this place is safe and secure. I'm thinking of installing security cameras as well. Knowing it would take some time, the couple went to find Ochako to tell her the news, only to see her joining the others in cleaning the pond. They could see she was talking to the boy with green hair and laughing about something. Ochako, shouted Taka. We're going to check the surrounding area for inspection, all right. Okay, Daddy, shouted Ochako back before turning back to talk to the boy. Chuckling, the couple began their inspection. A little later, their faces frowned at how clearly the previous company had slacked off on their part. The previous contract clearly stated for cement walls placed underground surrounding the area, and yet they could only find one at the gate entrance. When they told them of their inspection, Hotaru thanked them before dismissing them so they could get started on the project. "Now then," said Hotaru darkly as his face shadowed in anger, "I will be extracting every pound from that company for daring to cheat on me and embarrassing my benefactor." Later that day, the construction company that happened to be linked to Detonarat through various shell companies was sued to oblivion. Not even trying to declare bankruptcy would save them. Izuku sighed as he looked at the clock. It had been a complete month since the incident, and the rest of the families who were responsible for the incident never showed up, nor paid the first installment of the plan that had been established and signed. If they can't see what is given to them, then they deserve what's coming to them, thought Izuku. Being kind to an enemy just meant being cruel to yourself. However, it wouldn't mean that Izuku would follow their path so easily, something they all approved, as they had no desire to have Izuku being too merciless and cruel. They had all witnessed those who had done so. Izuku glanced to see two of the students glaring at him. He noted it was the ones who had finally reported one of their parents missing, and he suspected that they had been a part of the group who had been planning to kill him until his masters put down that plan hard. The lunch bell finally rang, allowing Izuku to stretch his limbs before deciding to head to the roof to eat alone. It allowed him to check in the gardens to make sure all the plants were growing nicely. Yonkai had promised to start him on alchemy, being experienced in such a field. Even Nai and Tang Sen yielded to him in this field, and Nai had more of a passing knowledge of the field while Tang Sen specialized in poison, though Tang Sen was going to teach him more about crafting Tang sect weapons and techniques, while Nai was going to go over some tactics and formations. "Attention students," blared the speakerphone over the school campus, catching everyone's attention. "Please report the auditorium immediately. All students and staff report to the auditorium. Attendance is mandatory." Everyone blinked before they started marching over to the auditorium, wondering what it would be about. Izuku sighed before he felt something was going to happen in his gut. "Maybe I should consider my family and my master's advice to be homeschooled instead," thought Izuku. "Then I wouldn't have to deal with this much bullshit." Soon, everyone made it to the auditorium, where they were quickly seated. The school generously provided everyone a lunch, only for Izuku to somehow to be missed. When asked, the staff said they had run out, even though they blatantly had more behind them. Izuku merely shrugged before pulling out his own lunch he had stored inside the storage bead. Izuku had about 2 bites before it was slapped out of his hands onto the floor by a staff member, the food scattering onto the floor. "Don't eat during an announcement by the principal. It's impolite and against the rules," sneered the teacher. Izuku just dully gazed at him before looking around to see all the other students clearly eating their lunches without disruption. The teacher could feel the questioning glance before responding. "They are normal in the future, not like you talentless brat who's nothing but a wah." "That's enough. The principal is about to make an announcement." "There's no need to make such a scene," interrupted Tanka, cutting in front of the teacher. "Let it go." The teacher scoffed before leaving, deciding it wasn't worth his time. Tanaka watched him go before slyly pulling out a slightly squished egg sandwich that he had been hiding, and tossing it to Izuku. "I'm sorry about that, but this was all I could sneak out," whispered Tanaka. Izuku nodded as he ate the sandwich in gratitude in quick bites before anyone could rat him out. Then the principal of the school came up before making an announcement. Izuku instantly tuned him out as he was spouting something about humility, forgiveness, and something about being human. It wasn't until the principal specifically called for his class to come up stage did Izuku realize that something was up once more, again targeted at him. At this point, he was wondering if the whole school religiously followed the Meta Liberation War book, or if it was common for every middle school to be like this. "Midoriya, please stand over there," said the principal, pointing to an area in the middle of the stage, away from his classmates, with no change in his tone. Izuku did as he told, wondering just what was going on. "As I said, forgiveness and humility is a big step in becoming a human being in this society," said the principal, "which is why we will be taking this first step in a public setting." Izuku turned to look at the principal and the other 29 students there. While Katsuki and the one other student who had actually worked and paid their share, the other 27 hadn't done anything. Was this an attempt for the principal to help Izuku convince the 27 students to actually serve their punishment? "Midoriya, get down on your knees and apologize to your superior classmates," ordered the principal. "Nope, it was just another blatant discrimination attempt from the damn school." "Midoriya, jealousy is such an ugly sin," continued the principal with a mocking tone. "To think you would lead our brightest students to your home under false pretenses and then scam them out of their time and money. but justice will prevail, and humility and forgiveness is a big step into becoming a better person. Izuku had no doubt that the principal probably thought that he wasn't even a human being just because of a toe joint and a lack of a quirk. Yes, your first step for forgiveness is to tell the police that it was a misunderstanding and that you're at fault, monologued the principal. You should also pay reparations for physical and emotional damage. About 10 million yen to each student should do, as well as 100 million to the school for causing the staff such distress. And then sign this contract stating that you will serve them all as a servant. It's only fair, right? To become a proper person, one must know their proper place. 27 of the students cheered and hooted in response while Katsuki and one other student stayed silent. In the audience, Izuku noted half of the students were cheering and agreeing with the principal while another half stayed silent, looking away in discomfort. He noted that the latter half were the ones who had weak or villainous quirks and were the unpopular students. Most of the staff seemed to agree with the principal, too. So then Midoriya, if you would just sign here, you can begin your path to where you truly belong, stated the principal as he pulled out a contract from somewhere. Otherwise, things will be difficult for you here. You might not even graduate. Greed can be such an ugly sin as well. With all that, Izuku made the only real choice he had. No, replied Izuku, ripping the contract in half. They willingly trespassed into my family property despite all the warning signs posted, going through the gate without permission before willfully destroying property before trying to blackmail me and bully me. All the actions of a typical villain. And yet instead of educating them, you want to enable them to continue such deeds, telling them it's fine to do so to anyone they want without repercussions. I am not a scapegoat that you can just walk over. The principal merely huffed before his eyes gleamed as he snapped his fingers. Izuku suddenly felt wires wrapping around his limbs before they pulled, suspending him in midair. Well, I didn't want to do this, but you left me no choice, sighed the principal in a fake tone. We'll get that signature one way or the other, but I prefer this method. Izuku glanced over to see one of the staff, who had raised her hands. Izuku could see wires coming out of her fingers, letting him know she was the one responsible. Her quirk allowed her to fire out webbing similar to a spider from her fingers. She grinned, allowing her sharp teeth to show itself. It warmed Izuku's heart to see the only teacher whom he had respect for try to do something. But he was helpless as he was held back by the other staff members. A little corporal punishment is in order, said the principal as he pulled out a wicked-looking whip with small spikes all over it. You do know that it's illegal in Japan to do this, said Izuku dully. It's illegal to do it on a normal human being. Not a quirkless freak like you, snorted the principal, revealing his true colors. You're not even human, just a bug that belongs underneath us true humans. Now then, it's only fair for the students to get their share. With that, the principal handed the whip to a student, who looked eager to whip Izuku without punishment. Izuku stoically took the hits without even saying anything. With his cultivation, he could just create a Kai barrier right before impact, allowing him to protect himself. However, most of the kids failed to even land a proper hit, even with the principal teaching them. Soon, almost all of them had a turn before the whip was passed over to Katsuki. Go ahead, Bakugo, said the principal, his voice oozing with pride. Show the freak what it means to mess with the best. Make sure to hit him real hard. Katsuki's mind was racing through everything now, with seconds seemingly being extended into hours. What they were doing wasn't right, and yet everyone seemed to think it was okay. Don't you want to be a hero? Asked the principal. Then punish the villain in front of you. Show him what it means to be the best. Katsuki mechanically began to raise his hand, pulling the whip back. His eyes stared into Izuku as he looked back without any emotion. Do it. Show that worthless Deku where he belongs, whispered a voice in Katsuki's head. It seemed to rebound and magnify in his mind. As Katsuki raised the whip higher, another voice and image blared in his mind, cutting through the voice. When did the headstrong boy who always wanted to be the leader suddenly become a follower? Katsuki could see his father's face, his voice ringing through the first voice, the look of disappointment. It was enough to shock Katsuki out of the trance, his eyes quickly roving all over the place until he noticed someone muttering behind the curtains. He saw a short fat janitor with flabs of fat on his neck, muttering under his breath. Katsuki's ears strained, focusing on the man until he could hear his voice. Punish that Deku. Make him bleed. Show him he's worthless, muttered the janitor. Katsuki's mind quickly pieced up everything that had been going on before his anger point peaked once more. With a roar, Katsuki snapped the whip down hard. Upon impact, it would certainly leave a mark that would be bloody, scarring flesh for sure. The whip's target did not land on Izuku, but rather on the janitor. You asshole, roared Katsuki, surprising everyone at who Katsuki had hit instead as he threw the whip aside, blasting forward and tackling the janitor into the ground, who squealed in pain. It was you who put those damn thoughts in my mind, in my subconscious, howled Katsuki. Nobody messes with my mind. The principal, seeing things starting to fall apart, grabbed the whip while putting a spike at the cracker before snapping it towards Izuku, intent on gouging Izuku's eye out as punishment. It was at this point that multiple things happened. Izuku suddenly moved, grabbing the whip out of midair and halting its path. This, in response, moved the webbing that had tied Izuku up, showing he could have broken free any time. And the webbing was still connected to the woman who had been controlling it. And since the webbing was still taut with no slack, something had to give way for Izuku's movement. That happened to be the woman's arm, which had been forcefully twisted until her bones snapped under pressure. And finally, the auditorium door was blasted open. Who am I? Am I a dog or a mouse or a bear? I'm Nezu, the dean of UA University, and also currently moonlighting as an educational inspector. I heard rumors about this school and came to investigate if it was true. Standing in front of the door was the nightmare of schools everywhere, the crusher of many hopeful students who tried to apply to his school for the hero course, Dean Nezu. Considering the acceptance rate to the UA hero course was 0.2%, it was a title he accepted. Now then, I seem to be witnessing a rather illegal attempt at corporeal punishment. You may say whatever you want in your defense, but know that it will be used against you, even silence, stated Nezu. The fact that he didn't say can, but will, showed just how furious Nezu was. He was an avid advocate against discrimination. And right now, what he was seeing was discrimination and bullying at the highest levels, especially at a school where the authority figures were doing it. It certainly set a horrible example for the impressionable minds of teens, who would go into society believing that this behavior was appropriate. No, this is a mistake, panicked the principal, dropping the whip. This is fault, shouted the principal, pointing at Izuku. He's a villain who is controlling us with a mind control quirk. Oh, thank you for saving us. Arrest him. Send him to Tartarus. The principal ran towards Nezu before falling to his knees, sliding right in front of Nezu while assuming the doja position. A mind control quirk? Questioned Nezu with a blank face. Try again. I'm more than aware of what is going on. Public humiliation and punishment while trying to act as if you were heroes. Attempted blackmailing just due to one's quirk status. The principal tried to switch tacks. You know he's quirkless. That means everything we're doing is completely legal. He's not even a human being like you and I, just an animal, like a cow. He's nothing more than a test subject for us too. Before the principal could continue speaking, he felt soft paws suddenly grab his jaw harshly. Mind repeating that again, said Nezu calmly. But anyone could see within his eyes was a fire burning, itching to incinerate the fools in his path. Shit, there's no other choice, thought the principal as he used his quirk, his hand transforming into an ice pick. I'll just kill this rat, and that way, we can continue our lesson on why the quirkless don't deserve to even live. No witnesses. Oh, and I didn't come alone, said Nezu with a malicious grin. The man felt his quirk suddenly leave, followed by a cloth wrapping around his hand. Before the principal knew it, he was being hurled to the ground. I had my fellow hero co-workers and the police with me, finished Nezu as heroes from UA University along with a whole squadron of police officers, complete with a SWAT team. They flooded into the auditorium, swiftly arresting all the staff members before managing to pry Katsuki off the janitor. The wailing teacher with a broken arm was brought to the ambulance to have her arm wrapped into a cast before being arrested for quirk abuse. Izuku broke free of the webbing as the teacher had disconnected the webbing after having her arm broken. Students were quickly rounded up, and parents or guardians were called in. Soon, the ones left in the auditorium were Izuku, Inko, Katsuki, Masaru, Mitsuki, and one of the children who had been obediently following the punishment with her mother on one side, with the rest of the students with their family were on the other side. Already the 27 families were jeering, insulting, and doing anything they could loudly while trying to pass themselves as the victim despite what they had done. Masaru alone managed to pull Mitsuki and Katsuki back from attacking them, especially at the janitor on the side. Enough, shouted a voice, silencing them all. Everyone looked to see an old man walking forward, his back hunched over, using a cane to help him walk. However, nobody commented about that. He was the father of the current patriarch of the Yaoyorozu family, the elder who helped lead the Yaoyorozu group. Good. It's annoying when insects buzz incessantly without cause, breathed the elder before snapping his attention toward the 27 families with a cold glare, causing them to stop. The elder slowly turned his gaze towards Izuku, with his face going considerably warmer. You must be his disciple, smiled the elder. I remember seeing you when your master came in with my son and did the impossible and cured me of my disease. Have no worries. I, Morino Yaoyorozu, will handle this and make sure they don't bother you ever again. With that, Morino turned around, his cane stamping into the ground harshly. You were all given a chance to repay the damages your brats caused on my ground, roared Morino. And you were even given leniency as well. A chance for them to do community service while training their quirks, all at an affordable payment plan tailored to your own income status. Yet despite the generous terms, you all turned your back and spat at it, thinking you were above it all. Did you think because Midoriya is quirkless that you could ignore and disdain him? knowing fully well that disrespecting him means disrespecting my family, the Yaoyorozu family, who stand with him. Well, that ends today. If you won't take up on his generosity, then you can take up on my fury. All children who fail to show up will have a permanent mark on their records as well as be recommended sent to juvie hall, if not prison. As for payments, you will all pay what is owed by next week, with no exceptions. All of what is owed. That'll bankrupt us, cried out one of them. And I don't care, spat out Morino. Sell your houses or declare bankruptcy, but know that the Yaoyorozu will extract the full amount owed no matter what. While the families began wailing about the injustice or other things, a hero swung by. This hero was one of the ones who had swung by after a lot of arrests had already been made, and was purely joining in to provide backup, or in a more realistic case, gain more recognition by showcasing himself helping arrest villains without actually having done anything. Now, don't you think that's too harsh? Asked the hero, taking on the 27 family's side after inquiring and finding out about Izuku being quirkless. These young children still have a future. It would be a shame to force them to find other ways, like becoming a villain instead of a hero. While the families began to grasp at his words, others found his words quite literally bullshit. I mean, it's not like they did anything that they deserved this treatment, continued the hero before whispering. Especially considering the other student is quirkless and a waste of space. Honestly, they were doing the right thing in punishing him to show where he belongs. What he didn't realize was that when he said that, he was still within earshot of Nezu and Morino. Being old didn't mean being deaf, as the hero realized that when he was hit in the shin by Morino. The hero went down onto one knee, only for his other knee to quickly follow as Nezu smacked him from behind. Listen up, boy, snarled Morino. I realize that you think taking on their side would make you think you'd get more fame, but you should realize all you did was put yourself on a platter for me to rip you apart as well. Indeed, you thought by doing such an act would make you look more heroic, but when you breathed out those words, you merely painted a target for him, and more importantly, me, grinned Nezu as he grabbed the hero by his cheeks. Now I know you're not a graduate at UA. Otherwise you would have expelled, if not rejected from the start. Which begs the question, which university allowed you to develop such a view? Looks like I'll be far busier than dismantling a middle school. As for the children, they were already given a chance and failed to repent. It doesn't matter who the other person is, but if a person willfully ignores the contract and laws placed in society, then they are no better than animals. How can society expect to grow when they ignore laws in place of their ego? The hero soon realized that he had committed career suicide by placing himself in front of two dragons. Auditorium Middle School was, of course, closed down with many of its staff being sent to jail. Izuku spoke up in defense of Tanaka, who had always tried to treat everyone fairly, and so was let go with just a warning as well as a new job waiting for him by the Yaoyorozu family's recommendation. It was then that Izuku decided he wanted to be homeschooled, as it would allow him to focus on his studies with his academics and his cultivation instead of being bullied and pointlessly wasting time. Inko was a little wary of this, as she was afraid that Izuku would become socially inept if he didn't spend time with others. But the fact was that he had no real friends at school, and there was no guarantee the new school would be the same. The Yaoyorozu family spared no expense in helping Izuku hire the best tutors once he expressed interest. What helped cinch the deal was when Izuku found out the constructors they had hired had a daughter who ended up having to accompany them to work after school while they were there working, as they didn't have enough money to hire a babysitter. Izuku managed to convince the Uraraka to have their daughter Achako withdraw from her current middle school so she have classes with Izuku with the tutor, thus allowing Izuku to have someone to socialize with. While the parents themselves were reluctant for a bit, they soon caved in when Achako pleaded with her parents to let her. She admitted that she didn't have many friends at her own school due to her family's financial standing. Achako didn't get invited to hang out as much as she always opted to go home so as to save as much money as they could, which led her to be an outcast as well as looked down upon, though nothing like Izuku's situation. Her parents felt guilty and relented since they would be working in that area for quite some time, especially since she would be tutored by the best tutors available. At the police station, the janitor had been slammed into a small interrogation room, awaiting interrogation. He sneered, thinking he would be released soon. There was no evidence against him, just a kid who was stating that he had used his quirk on him. It was true, as his quirk was called subliminal messaging, but there was no proof. All he had to do was wait. And when he was out, he'd sick the students on Izuku again. Suddenly, the door opened to reveal Masaru Bakugo by himself. The janitor raised his eyebrow at this as the man sat on the other side of the table. He had seen him before and thought him to be a rather meek man, though the wife was a total bombshell. "So you were the one who was influencing my son," said Masaru with a neutral tone. "Maybe," mocked the janitor. "There's no proof. Even if the police have my quirk on file, there's no proof that I used it. I could be just muttering it." And your son echoed my sentiments. Masaru just remained silent, staring at the janitor. Feeling like he was ahead, he decided to mock Masaru even further. "You know, you should be careful how you treat me," taunted the janitor. "Who knows what thoughts could harbor in your son or wife? Maybe he'll become great or not. Perhaps your wife will grow tired of you, and maybe want a taste of my rod, or maybe want to taste something new. Maybe more than one. She is a model, isn't she? Who knows what she's doing, or what her mind will tell her to do? And you, who knows, maybe you enjoy being cucked like that. Seeing how your son acts, it's hard to believe that he's even related to you. Maybe he's acid sweat," said Masaru, interrupting the janitor's spiel. "That's my quirk." "Ooh," began the janitor in surprise, only for Masaru to continue. "I sweat acid, though mostly from my hands," explained Masaru. "Luckily, I can control what I can sweat, though it is mostly combustive and explosive. Soap can neutralize it, and my wife's quirk, glycerin, also helps out a lot so I don't accidentally set one off on her. But if I focus, I can choose what I sweat out sometimes. And my son's quirk, explosion, utilize nitroglycerin-like sweat. The glycerin comes from my wife, of course, while the sulfur and nitric acid come from me." "Why are you explaining this?" asked the janitor, feeling something was wrong, and he was scared. "Did you know that both acids are rather corrosive?" questioned Masaru. "Luckily, my body adapts to this so I don't get affected as much. I can't just produce it at will like my son can. But it comes out as sweat. Feels rather hot in here, doesn't it?" The janitor, not trusting his voice, nodded. He had noticed he had been sweating for a bit, and the room did seem a little warm. "Makes a man sweat," said Masaru as he wiped his forehead with the back of his right hand and his neck with the back of his left hand. "Well, I've taken enough of your time. It's getting too hot for me here, so I'm going to go buy some ice cream to cool down. Maybe take some for my wife." With that, Masaru stood up while flicking his hands forward towards the janitor. The janitor felt sweat drops hitting him, some getting into his eyes, but mostly on his face. "That's your petty revenge," giggled the janitor, "getting sweat on me. Wait till I get out of here. I'll make sure your wife becomes a whore for my dick. I'll make sure that you won't be able to get it up unless you watch your wife getting stuffed by other men while you—" Masaru had already closed the door, causing the janitor to huff as he sat back down. He would be out, and his first objective would be to make that hot MILF his playtoy. Then, he felt his eyes suddenly itch, as well as his skin, specifically where the sweat drops had landed. Suddenly, it burned, causing him to shout in pain. He screamed as he fell onto the floor, his hands clawing at his face while rubbing his eyes, only to make it worse. As he writhed in pain, he suddenly remembered Masaru's words, that his quirk was acid sweat, and he could focus on what he let out, and he was already sweating when he walked in. The janitor didn't get to think about it too much as pain overrode all his senses. Masaru slowly walked out of the police station, taking a deep breath. He didn't regret what he had done. The man had touched his kid, and he was going to make sure that he never did so again. If he was arrested, so be it. Mitsuki was the major moneymaker in the family, being a model while he was mostly a designer. "Don't worry, you won't be arrested," said a voice from behind him, causing Masaru to jolt in surprise before shaking it off. "I've made sure of it. The police will just write this off as an accident of some sort. It doesn't help that he's got a nasty rep already, and is actually wanted in a few other regions." "Thank you," said Masaru, "for arranging this meeting. If a man's child is hit, then it is natural for the older one to ask for justice," chuckled the voice. "This is an unquestionable principle under the heavens. Go back home. Your child still has much to do." Masaru nodded as he quickly left. As the moon moved, it shined over the area where the voice originated to reveal Tang-san. With a shake of his head, Tang-san suddenly disappeared from view. By the time the police could get the janitor to a doctor, it had been too late. The man was permanently blind, and his face scarred. But there was no sympathy for the man when he was sent to jail. It had been several years since that incident. Aldera Middle School had been completely shut down due to it. What helped drive the stake in was the proof that Izuku had gathered over the year during his time there. However, it wasn't the only school that had suffered. After the hero who had committed career suicide in front of Nezu and Morino, Nezu investigated just where he went to high school and college. It ended up with another high school being closed and a college hero course being completely revamped when it was discovered the department head was a corrupt woman involved in embezzlement and spreading her own racist beliefs. Izuku was now in the last year of his high school education, getting ready for his choice of university. Despite everything that had happened, Izuku still wanted to become a hero. When it came time to choose his own path, Izuku chose to follow the Tao of life and death. He chose this path because he wanted to save as many people as he could, and to bring justice to those who no longer lived but still had regrets. It sounded like a foolish dream, but it was one that Izuku wanted. And the best part was that his masters all gave him their blessings. None of them wanted Izuku to follow in their own paths, but to pursue his own. Each one of them taught Izuku auxiliary skills to complement his cultivation. Izuku also achieved straight 5 seconds on his report cards, even if he was homeschooled. The Yaoyorozu family had hired the best tutors who would judge fairly. Though his social life was a little lacking, it wasn't as if he was completely alone. Momo would come to visit now and then when she wasn't busy with school or social events for the family. His father, who had gone up the ranks, now had more free time to come back home to spend precious quality time with Izuku. Katsuki was somewhat iffy, though he would come to visit, only to spar against Izuku to make sure that, in his own words, Deku doesn't slack off. Lastly, Ochako was a huge help. Ochako had joined in the tutoring session, becoming friends with Izuku and even closer. Even when the construction job was finished, Ochako wanted to stay with Izuku, stating that it would help improve her chances of becoming a hero. The parents couldn't really argue that Ochako wasn't getting the necessary education as she was being taught by the top tutors in the world. As for friendship with her old school, Ochako didn't have any close friends. This was mainly because of her economic situation, something the parents did feel a little guilty about. Ochako couldn't go out to play as often, and some of the students looked down at her. The two wouldn't just stay indoors, but also go out to spend time, whether it was the library, the arcade, or even just a park. When people looked at them, they would say that the two were very close, as if brothers and sisters, considering they knew each other's actions so well. Meanwhile, at that moment, the sounds of moans could be heard as well as flesh slapping into one another before it fell silent. Two bodies laid against each other intertwined with no clothes on either one, breathing heavily. Just because people said they looked and acted like brother and sister didn't mean they were. The two began clean up after each other, putting their clothes on when a hand snaked over to the girl's chest, giving it a squeeze. Insatiable, scoffed Ochako as she gently swatted Izuku's hand. "How can I not be when you keep tempting me?" asked Izuku as he gently hugged Ochako from behind. Who was the one who initiated first with her hands? "Who, me?" replied Ochako slyly as she pulled up her bra, letting Izuku help her clip it back on. "I merely wanted to grab the large sausage that I dropped while we were eating on the couch watching a movie. It's not my fault that it fell down towards your crotch, and I was too busy watching the movie to see where I was grabbing." "Yes, but instead of moving your hand away, you began to play with it," chuckled Izuku as he began to comb Ochako's hair down a little. Ochako stuck out her tongue a little before putting on the rest of her clothes. "I'm going to head back home. My mom's expecting me to help out with dinner tonight. You're going to leave me by myself tonight," pouted Izuku as he nipped Ochako's neck. Ochako turned around, grabbing his face before planting a kiss on Izuku's lips before leaning back. "You know damn well that I know you won't be sleeping alone tonight. Momo is coming over to study with you. Itsuka and Yui will probably come over if they have time. You have other lovers." "True, but each one of you is unique," whispered Izuku as he hugged Ochako. "Never forget that. It was you when we took each other's virginity." Having grown up next to each other almost daily when Ochako joined Izuku for his tutoring, they became close if not best friends. When puberty hit, it hit hard for the two of them. They began to notice each other, and it didn't take long for the two of them to agree to explore each other's bodies. One thing led to another, and the two found themselves lying in bed, clothes scattered everywhere, with blood on the sheets. The two were lucky it had been a safe day and practiced safe sex since. "I know," smiled Ochako as she lightly patted Izuku's cheeks. "But Daddy is celebrating the big sale they recently had. It's thanks to your dad recommending us to Momo's family to do the whole reconstruction." Business began booming because of this deal, and soon a lot of companies wanted to use the same construction company that the Yaoyorozu family employed. The two said their goodbyes before Izuku went to grab something to drink before snapping on some weights. With a huff, Izuku began a series of stretches and exercises before finishing it up with a one-finger handstand. With each breath, all his muscles strained and trembled, allowing him to train his whole body. "That never gets tiring," breathed Izuku as he finished up. "Been a while since I went for a run." Izuku took a deep breath as he stopped to take a quick breather underneath a bridge. Though it was old-fashioned, Izuku had been carrying a basket full of rocks on his back during his whole run. Stretching his muscles a little, Izuku let his mind wander a little. He was now Platinum Rank 3, and though his progress was slower than his teacher's own experience, they were freaks of their own, and technically speaking, two of them had been reincarnated. They didn't push Izuku too harshly on his cultivation path either, as he was taking supplementary skills with them. Alchemy, smithing, formations, all paths that would inevitably take time away. But Izuku eagerly devoured each skill without complaint, something his teachers were happy to see Izuku doing. As Izuku finished taking his break, he heard something clanging. Taking a look towards the source, he saw a manhole cover dropping onto the ground before something slimy came up. "A medium-sized invisibility cloak to capture," muttered the sludge villain, pushing the cover back onto the hole before leaping towards Izuku to capture him. He had just robbed a convenience store, only to run into All Might of all people. He ended up losing his loot before diving into the sewers in the hope of escaping before coming out. seeing a teenager that happened to standing there. He resolved to take Izuku hostage. Izuku immediately tossed his basket right at the villain, allowing the large rocks to fly all over the sludge villain. The villain didn't flinch when a majority hit his body, but did wince when the basket and a rock hit his eyes, something Izuku immediately noticed before compartmentalizing everything. The sludge villain threw out a blind lash in hopes of grabbing Izuku, only for him to duck under it before jumping away. "Damn it, kid, that hurt. I'm only trying to take over your body," shouted the sludge villain. "Now stand still, I need that body. I promise, after 45 seconds, you won't even feel a thing. I can't just play around. I need a body strong enough to defeat him. Better to hold hostage," thought the villain before sending multiple tentacles to capture Izuku. Izuku began weaving and dodging the tentacles, making violent cuts and movements that made him elusive like a ghost. How to deal with him, thought Izuku. Technically, I can use self-defense in this case. But the question of how to do it without being questioned, or worse, interrogated. As Izuku kept dodging, he was surveying the surrounding area, looking for something to use. Toshinori Yagi, or better known by his hero name All Might, punched the manhole cover out of the way before climbing out of the sewers, pursuing the sludge villain while still carrying his groceries. He blinked as he witnessed a civilian no older than perhaps 17 years old dodging the slippery villain that had almost escaped him. "Wow, those are some movements," whistled All Might in his mind. Such moves would perplex many opponents. He watched as Izuku dodged another attack, landing on his hands before spinning his body with a turn of his wrist to dodge another attack. All Might quickly slapped himself out of the trance he had put himself in, remembering he had a job to do as well as a time limit. "Damn, this bastard is slippery," thought the sludge villain. "His movements are so weird, it's like catching a ghost." "How about an all-out attack?" shouted the sludge villain as he fired multiple tentacles to surround Izuku. "You shall not do so," exclaimed All Might, announcing his presence while causing both Izuku to stop in admiration of his favorite hero while the sludge villain halted in fear and shock. "Why?" "Because I am here." "Shit," shouted the sludge villain, swinging a larger tentacle with the shape of a hand at the end to attack All Might. All Might easily ducked under the attack and cocked his right arm back. Texas, smash. All Might threw a right straight so powerful from a distance that the wind pressure exerted from the punch sent the sludge villain flying, disintegrating into small manageable pieces. Izuku quickly lowered himself to the ground to stabilize himself from the buffeting winds. But All Might had calculated in Izuku and aimed the attack precisely so it wouldn't affect him as much. If Izuku hadn't met his masters and became numb to their achievements, perhaps at one time he would have stood there in awe at the presence of All Might. The man was currently stuffing the sludge villain into some emptied soda bottles that he had been conveniently carrying as part of his groceries. Now, while he was still a bit of a fanboy, after all, it had been All Might that had inspired him to become a hero, to help rescue people, to save those in need, and to defeat those who wished to do injustice to others. "Are you all right?" asked All Might towards Izuku, snapping him out of his trance. "Yeah, I'm fine," nodded Izuku, just a bit excited and out of it to see you here in the flesh. All Might laughed with his booming voice and smile. "No worries. I'm glad I was here to help. Now then, I must take this villain to the authorities." All Might quickly put the soda bottles into his pockets before bending his knees down, for a pro doesn't just battle enemy, but time itself. "Thank you for your support, and farewell." Right before All Might jumped though, Izuku saw it in slow motion. The soda bottle hadn't been properly secured in the pocket and was already slipping out. Instinctively, Izuku moved, his hand reaching out to tell All Might that it wasn't secured, or maybe even do it for him. All Might jumped into the air before noticing something was off. Like his leg, specifically his left leg. Looking down, he noticed Izuku hanging onto his leg. "Hey, let go. There's a line between being too enthusiastic and you just crossed it," said All Might as his hand was about to pull Izuku off before remembering he was in the middle of the air. All Might quickly glanced around before finding a perfectly abandoned rooftop to land on. After landing, All Might took a glance down to see what was going on before noticing Izuku's hand was in his pocket. "You didn't secure the bottle properly," rasped out Izuku as he held up his other hand to show the bottle containing the sludge villain. "It fell as you were about to jump. You would have kicked at your jump, sending it flying somewhere. I wanted to stop you while catching the bottle, but you jumped before I could stop you." "Oh, sorry about that," blushed All Might. "Thank you for your concern. It seems I was a bit too hasty." Taking the soda bottle. This time All Might made sure it was safely secured in his cargo pants, even to go far as to use a string to wrap around his thigh. Well, time to begin All Might before he felt a jab of pain shooting through his body. "Shit, not now," cursed All Might mentally as he fought to maintain his current form. He couldn't reveal his secret now, especially to a civilian. Izuku hadn't noticed what was going on, but since the #1 hero was here in his presence, his inspiration to become a hero was because of him. He had a burning question to ask. "All Might," Izuku half-shouted, asked, drawing the man's attention, "do you believe a quirkless person like I can become a pro hero?" Quirkless? Questioned All Might, his mind flashing back to Izuku dodging the villain's attacks. I thought he had some sort of reflex enhancement quirk or a mutant one. You're telling me that was done without a quirk? All Might didn't get to pursue that thought as he coughed out blood once more, his body steaming. Izuku hadn't noticed as he looked up to the sky, continuing his words. For most of my life, I've been told that I would amount to nothing. Peers would make fun of me or taunt me just because I was quirkless. A hero saw me being bullied and did nothing because I was quirkless. But I've also met people who believe in me. So I wanted to ask you, the person whom I aspired to become, to help save and rescue people with a smile that brings hope, can I become a hero? Izuku looked down from the heavens just to see an emaciated All Might standing there. He blinked in shock before exclaiming, "What the hell happened? Are you an imposter?" The skinny man stood there before stating, "I am All Might," all while coughing up blood. Izuku had to shake his head, rubbing his eyes in hopes that it was an illusion, even slapping himself. All Might sat down before lifting up his shirt. "Now that you've seen my true form, I might as well tell you the truth. Just don't go telling everyone about this, all right? Truth is I suffered a major wound 5 years ago. Took out my left lung and stomach. Even after constant surgery and treatments, I've been reduced to this emaciated state. I can only work about 3 hours every day now. 5 years ago. Was it toxic chainsaw?" muttered Izuku as he approached All Might, grabbing his wrist before feeling his pulse with his fingers. "That's the only notable high-ranking villain that you fought. I see you know your facts." "But no," replied All Might, letting Izuku feel his pulse, not quite sure what he was doing, but letting him as there was no harm. "That punk wasn't strong enough to do this. This fight was never displayed to the public because of my request. I will save people with a smile. The symbol of peace cannot be daunted by evil. The reason I smile is to help push off the pressure of being a hero as well as tricking the fear inside of me." All Might stood up, making Izuku let go of his wrist. "A pro hero must be willing to lay his or her life down on the line. I cannot say that you can become a pro hero without a quirk, even with your training." Izuku's bangs shadowed over his eyes as All Might continued. "If you want to help others, you can become a police officer. They are often teased because villains are delivered to their doorstep. But it's still a fine occupation." All Might looked down at Izuku, noticing his head was down. It hurt him to say that, but he didn't want people to risk their lives without knowing what they were getting into or not having enough power. It was sad, but it was the truth, in his opinion. Justice without power was inefficient, especially with villains growing stronger nowadays. "It's not bad to dream," finished All Might as he moved to put his hand on Izuku's shoulder as if to comfort him. "But you have to consider what's realistic." Before All Might could put his hand on Izuku's shoulder, he felt it being slapped away by Izuku's hand. All Might froze when Izuku looked up to meet his eyes in time to see a fire burning within as well as a cold gaze. "You're just like those heroes," spat out Izuku, putting out lip service just to look good. "I looked up to you, thinking you'd be different from those heroes. I was a kid when I saw a hero sneering at me when I was being beaten up. When asked why he wasn't helping me, he said that all he saw were some kids roughhousing around while also establishing the proper hierarchy. And I quote, and preparing the quirkless brat where he belongs, underneath us proper humans as slaves." All Might stiffened at that statement. He was being judged as the same as someone who had said those words. And they hurt him much more than the injury All for One had given him. "Who said that?" snarled All Might, "and please don't." Izuku interrupted him. "I know it's not fair to compare you to him, but it just reminded me of that. Just because I was born quirkless into this world, I was treated as trash. Nobody would help me until I met my masters. But I looked up to you, thinking I could become someone that inspired hope. I wanted to save people, to help those in need. I remember an interview where you said these lines, 'If you believed in yourself and worked hard, you too can become a hero.'" Izuku sighed as he turned away. "I'll take your words into consideration, but I will prove you wrong and become a hero." As Izuku was about to leave, he paused for a second before pulling a bottle out of his pocket and tossing it to a stunned All Might, who managed to regain his wits to catch it. "Eat that pill. It's a 9 transformation heavens pill. It'll heal up your organs. This also serves to sever the last link between you and me. From now on, I have no connections with you," declared Izuku before running towards the edge of the roof. All Might finally shook out of his shock, his hand reaching out, thinking Izuku was committing suicide or something, only to see Izuku jump off the roof. All Might quickly rushed forward, ready to bulk up again only to see Izuku safely landing on top of another roof. What shocked him was Izuku kept running, hopping over rooftops without pause before vanishing from sight pretty fast. All Might had to take a deep breath as he contemplated the boy's words as well as his own. He had already delivered the sludge villain to the nearest police station, and was now sitting down at a bench, watching kids playing around a water fountain. "Were my words too harsh?" thought All Might as he took a sip of water. "Perhaps I should have toned it down. But I had no idea the boy had gone through such things." Then the words quirkless came crashing into All Might's mind. making him wince. He himself had been quirkless, hoping to do something to change the world. Just like that boy, he had dreams of becoming someone to change the world. And he was given the chance by his master Nana, who saw something in him. And the exact same scenario came into play. And I chose to reject him instead of following what Nana did. Thought All Might to himself miserably, I am a hypocrite, aren't I? But I didn't want the boy to suffer like I am. All Might contemplated about his past. Before he had gotten his quirk. Through his childhood and middle school, he had been taunted about his status before, but they were merely just words. As for parents, well, he had been orphaned during middle school due to a villain attack. The only key lining in that was his parents had been very rich, giving him enough to live off his trust funds. But he wanted more. He wanted to become someone who could stop such things, to make his situation not a common occurrence. Then in came Nana Shimura, with a quirk he hadn't expected to be transferable, who saw his dreams and gave him the tools to accomplish them. And years later, he had finally gotten revenge for his master's death by punching the arch-nemesis of his quirk, one for all, in the face and into the ground. He wasn't sure what happened afterward due to his injuries, but he was pretty sure he caved in the man's face and splattered his brains into the ground. And now a quirkless boy who had clearly been training asked the same question, only to be rejected viciously by someone who had been in his same situation. I need to make it up to him, declared All Might as he stood up. I have to apologize for my callous words, and who knows, maybe he'll prove me wrong. I'll start by looking. All Might's words failed to continue as he realized he didn't even know the kid's name. Just that he had green hair, freckles, and was pretty buff for his age. He said he wanted to become a hero. He looks like he's finishing up high school, meaning he'll be taking the hero entrance exams for the university. If he looked up to me, then he'd try out for my alma mater, UA University. I can look for him there, along with a few other entrance exams, concluded All Might. As he finished his thoughts, his hands touched the bottle that Izuku had given him. Lifting the bottle up, All Might uncorked the porcelain bottle before looking inside to see a big red pill about 1.5 centimeters in diameter. Looks like a red jawbreaker, muttered All Might before he remembered Izuku's words about healing his organs. All Might severely doubted such a miracle pill existed when no quirks or surgery had been able to help him, and was about to toss it away when something in him stopped him. All Might looked at the pill once more before making a decision to cork the bottle once more and pocketing it, not to throw it away, but still having doubts about the pill. Izuku was busy hammering away at a piece of metal with all his strength, uncaring that it had already been flattened. He was just doing it to vent his anger. Izuku raised his arm high once more to slam it into the metal when he felt someone grab his wrist. I believe that's enough. Any more and you'll hurt yourself, said an amused voice. Izuku turned to see Ally had stopped him. Sorry, just had to do something, mumbled Izuku. Ally shrugged before gesturing Izuku to come over to take a seat with him, pouring out some tea for the both of them. So, what's wrong? Asked Ally. I met my idol All Might today on my run, said Izuku after a tense moment of silence. The big buff dude with blonde hair, asked Ally for clarification, to which Izuku nodded. Not every day that you meet your idol. So what went wrong then? I asked him if a quirkless person like me could become a hero. And he said no, sighed Izuku. Izuku, started Ally, only for Izuku to shake his head. I know, and I told them I'd become one even without his approval, interrupted Izuku, but still, it was pretty disheartening to hear that from him. It makes me wonder if I'm even worthy to be your disciple. My cultivation is slow compared to what you all have gone through, not to mention how powerful you all are. Ally chuckled. Kid, the reason why our cultivation levels accelerated at such a young age is because we had some crazy coincidences. Technically, all of us have died at least once before we were reborn. Not very powerful if we died before, right? But our powers right now are mostly because our age is far greater than any of your people on this planet. With age comes wisdom and power, so to speak. Now if you were to compare to the prodigies of those who lived in our worlds, yes, you would be considered the slower ones and perhaps weaker. But we don't care, because all three of us have been weak before, considered talentless, useless, and unable to defy destiny. And yet we didn't give up, and climbed up to where we are. To become a cultivator means defying the heavens and earth. If your society deems you useless and a waste of space, then defy their expectations and ascend past them. Plus, despite your slow cultivation levels, you're learning 3 different auxiliaries: alchemy, blacksmithing, and formations. That's impressive. And not anybody can learn all 3 as you do and still keep up with your cultivation. Tang-san doesn't admit it, but he brags to his friends about you and your prodigious skills in learning the Tang sect skills, both outer and inner discipleships. He does, smiled Izuku. And Yonkai tells his wife that does alchemy about your progress in it. Though I dabbled in it, he's far better than me in it, and his wife surpasses him in that, continued Ally, so you have nothing to complain about. We're all proud of how far you've gotten. Izuku smiled at that before drawing a new piece of iron to smelt. While Momo could create all the parts he needed to make what he wanted to make, There was something about making the item himself with his heart and soul, utilizing the Tang Sect mysterious jade hand. Izuku went about crafting his newest item. Nilai smiled as he left Izuku alone. While they had been worried a little about Izuku learning all these different subjects, the boy had exceeded their expectation. Should get him a demon spirit soon, too, since his soul realm should be strong enough, muttered Nilai. Definitely a dragon bloodline, but which one would work best for him? Also should consider taking him to meet other cultivators around his level to some ancient ruins or realms. Izuku didn't hear anything as he was completely focused on his task now, though his mind couldn't help but drift to All Might. During their conversation, Izuku had felt his pulse and noticed all the injuries All Might had mentioned. But he also noticed something else. As he followed the Tao of life and death, he was naturally more attuned to souls. He had sensed 7 echoes, or souls, within All Might, and most surprisingly, they had willingly come over. Izuku couldn't feel any connections to their physical body, meaning their bodies had long been destroyed. And yet it wasn't like those dark cultivators his teachers had described to him before, who stole and ate other souls to strengthen themselves. Rather, they lived harmoniously within All Might's body. Probably some sort of quirk, muttered Izuku as he shoved those thoughts away. He had to focus on finishing up his tools as Nilai left. He was soon distracted when Momo arrived with her school books in the nude. An interesting fact about Momo was that she had a bit of a nudist streak from visiting the nudist beaches on her family trips. Obviously, she wouldn't flaunt it in public or at home except in her own room, but at Izuku's place, she was free to let go of her inhibitions. Despite arriving nude, the two did get their studies done, as they both wanted to get into UA University. Just being strong and athletic wouldn't cut it in one of the best hero courses in Japan. Of course, what happened after they finished their studies was another story. Next month, Izuku decided to change up his workout schedule for something new. The Takoba Municipal Beach was a trash heap with nobody wanting to clean it up due to how badly it had gotten. The city didn't want to waste money on a cleanup project, and heroes didn't want to do a job that gave them no income or fame in the short run. Perfect for training while doing community service, while also hiding from others. Izuku could just put all the trash into his storage device and toss it into a nearby landfill in a day. But Izuku decided to take the longer way and do it properly. Plus, who knew what sort of treasures could be lying around? He was sure Ochako would love some of the stuff that had been thrown out if they could fix it. Despite her family's situation being better due to the Yaeorzu family being their reference, they were still frugal in their spending. All while still wearing the weights Nilai had given him, Izuku began moving objects to the proper recycling bins. Might need to hire a trash truck to move some of this other stuff to the landfill, thought Izuku. How does a refrigerator make it here anyways? And is that an OLED television set? Doesn't even look broken, so why throw it out? I might take that home with me. As Izuku was separating the trash, 2 figures came into view. So that's where he is, huffed the first one with orange hair tied up into a ponytail on the left side and teal eyes. He owes me a rematch. Replied her friend with a black bob-shaped haircut and cerulean eyes. Come on, Yui, let's go, shouted the orange-haired girl as she rushed over to Izuku. Yui took her time to walk over instead. Izuku had finished clearing out a section of the area, creating a small space when he heard the sound of sand being displaced rapidly. Izuku felt someone jumping in the air before quickly diving forward in time to dodge a large palm strike right where he had been standing. Itsuka, been a while, grinned Izuku as he quickly shucked off his weights. Still upset about our spar last time? I'll beat you this time, shouted Itsuka as she drew back her hand, getting into a basic kung fu stance. Let's go. Itsuka blitzed forward, firing a barrage of punches at Izuku, who began dodging with the Tang Sex techniques, such as ghost perplexing steps for footwork, purple demon eye, which made his eyes glow purple but allowed him to see Itsuka's attacks in detail, enhancing his perception, and mysterious jade hands to help parry her attacks without hurting his own hands. Stop dodging so much, shouted Itsuka as Izuku continued to dodge. That footwork of yours is so confusing, and you won't teach it to me. It's a technique from my teacher, for members only, replied Izuku half-heartedly. I can't just teach it to you. I was taught briefly by your teacher's wife, doesn't that count? Shouted Itsuka as she tried to mix up her attack with a kick. That was one of my master's wives, yes, but not the one who taught me these techniques, riposted Izuku. While Nilai had been teaching Izuku, one of his wives, Zio Ninger, had been exploring a little before finding Itsuka and taught her how to fight for a little when the two were just children. When asked why Itsuka had caught her attention, she shrugged before replying that perhaps she saw a little of herself in Itsuka. Curious, Nilai brought Izuku over to have the two know each other, mostly for Izuku's benefit to socialize more. The two did get to know each other more and got closer until Itsuka had to move away. It was only more recently at the end of their first year of high school that they truly reconnected, though Itsuka was always asking for spars now. Then can't you get me in? Shouted Itsuka before grabbing some sand and hurtling it at Izuku to blind him. When he gives me permission, maybe, replied Izuku as he managed to dodge the sand attack, but not before then. And let's end this. Izuku suddenly grabbed Itsuka's wrist, using controlling crane capturing dragon to control her movements, judo throwing her right into the sand. Dang it, cursed Itsuka as Izuku threw a punch at Itsuka. Only to stop right in front of her nose. You win again. Good to see again, Itsuka, smiled Izuku as he unclenched his fist to give Itsuka a hand. Itsuka snorted as she grabbed the hand before letting Izuku pull her back onto her feet. Itsuka stretched her limbs out, testing her muscles for a second before tackling Izuku, planting her lips on his. The two ended up lying on a beach towel, courtesy of Yui who had enlarged it. I may have lost this fight, but I'm going to win our next one, said Itsuka with a lusty voice. I brought back up. Yui gave Izuku a victory sign as her other hand snaked down past Izuku's waist and alongside with Itsuka. They were lucky nobody even swung by. Otherwise, they would have heard the noises Yui was making despite trying to be quiet. Several months passed as Izuku prepared for the entrance exam. The Yaorazu family had offered to get Izuku into the recommendation exam, but he refused. He wanted to earn his place. That, and his status as quirkless might raise some eyebrows if he attended the recommendation exam. He had managed to raise his cultivation to platinum rank 4, and was hoping to raise it to rank 5 before the exam. Breaking into diamond, however, would be extremely difficult, at least according to his masters. It would involve some form of earth-shattering revelation or situation that normal cultivation training wouldn't do. They were prepared to take Izuku out of his world to explore a hidden realm filled with cultivators at his level. Taking a deep breath, Izuku took out his choice of weapon to practice on the beach. Izuku swung his weapon, taking in the strain. Izuku began to move in a blur, practicing his katas before ending it with a fierce strike against an abandoned vehicle. Spinning his weapon, Izuku slammed it into the sand to reveal a pole that was taller than him. Izuku had chosen a staff as his choice of weapon instead of the usual sword that most cultivators seem to choose. There were, of course, reasons for this. Izuku preferred something with a little more reach than all his other options. Momo also practiced Bujutsu, so it was a good bonding experience to fight against another staff user. It was also practical, since the staff could become a variety of weapons depending on how one held it. The staff that had been crafted for him was collapsible and telescopic, yet very durable, making it portable. Izuku looked around the area, noticing the beach was much cleaner now. Though it was mostly him, Ochako, Itsuka, Momo, and Yui would come to help out as well for their training. Especially with Yui and Ochako's quirk, one was able to alter the size of any object so it could be easily carried, and the other nullified the object's weight upon contact. With a month left, Izuku knew that Momo was taking the recommendation exam and wished her luck. Momo wanted her reward after the exam, but Izuku would be gone for the month. Yonkai had decided to take Izuku into a rather well-known training realm for people at his cultivation level. When they arrived via teleportation array and then by flying, Yonkai introduced him to a few other disciples who were readying themselves to jump into the realm. Izuku, stop geeking out, said Yonkai as he saw Izuku rapidly looking all around him while jotting everything down in his notebook. Sorry, master, but it's my first time on another planet, blushed Izuku. I suppose that's true, shrugged Yonkai. My wife, Xia Ningchang, is the star master of this planet, so she's more or less aware of what's going on if she focuses. She'll be looking over your safety while you are inside. But this is your training. Despite the fact your cultivation level is roughly the same as everybody going in, I will admit thanks to Nai and Tang San's help, you are more than prepared, along with your ingenuity. But what you lack is experience, so this will be good for you. Izuku nodded as the training realm opened, and was about to walk into it before Yonkai pulled him aside once more. One more thing. I know it's frowned upon in your own world and society, but in the world of cultivation, it's kill or be killed. Leave your common sense when out here. Do not hesitate to kill if your life is in danger, otherwise, you will die, warned Yonkai sternly. Remember, it's cruelty to yourself if you show mercy to your enemies. I'm not saying kill everyone, just you can't be kind to people who don't respect you. Only when you are strong enough can you adopt such an attitude. For instance, your masters don't care what weaklings say because no matter what they do, they can't hurt us. So learn to temper yourself and use your own judgment. Ignore those who like to trash talk. I was a paragon of virtue on that in your cultivation level, you know. While Izuku understood the message, he couldn't help but comment to himself, really? Master, I saw you beat up someone on our way here because they made a rude comment about your wife. Taking a deep breath, Izuku entered the training realm. Upon entering, Izuku landed in a forest before immediately surveying his surroundings. Without hesitation, Izuku pulled out a weapon from his storage. Although the godly huge crossbow was a deadly weapon, Tang Sen was not one to step away from innovation and admitted that the use of firearms was quite useful. However, he attributed such innovation to the fact that there had been no such thing as cultivation in Izuku's world. So right now, Izuku had pulled out a handgun that he had crafted under Tang-san's eyes that was able to use his Kai. "Alright, let's do this," breathed out Izuku. "Let's head to the first objective." With that, Izuku leaped forward into the unknown, ready to prove that he could handle this. It was time for the entrance exam to the UA University. Hopefuls from all over the country made their way to where the entrance exam was being hosted. Even students from other countries were trying out for it, with a good majority from the United States, considering All Might was considered the strongest hero in the world and had graduated from UA. It certainly played a lot of influence as All Might worked in America for a certain period of time. Standing in front of the entrance to the exam site were 3 ladies, waiting for someone to show up. The trio ignored the catcalls they would get every now and then, but they ignored it all. Their hearts belonged to one man only. "Where is he?" said Ochako as she looked around anxiously. "Don't worry, he wouldn't miss such an important day like this," comforted Itsuka. "He knows how important this is to him." Yui merely nodded and gave a thumbs up in agreement. All 4 ladies, including Momo, had been slightly frustrated when Izuku told them that he would be going on a month-long training trip with no real way to contact him. Though they pondered just where Izuku was going to train that they wouldn't be able to reach him, they trusted him and his teachers. Momo especially, as young Kai had saved her father's life as well as her grandfather's. "It's getting close," fretted Ochako as she glanced at her watch, noting the time. Soon the doors would close, and anyone outside would not be allowed in, no exceptions. "We should get in and get seated first at least," reasoned Itsuka. "Izuku will come for sure, and he wouldn't want us to risk our own chances." Ochako looked around once more before agreeing with Itsuka and Yui, walking into the exam site. Soon, the courtyard was slowly emptying out, as all attendees who were taking the time to relax had come in, along with a few stragglers. "Last call," shouted a staff member as they began cleaning up. "Close the doors." The door began closing as staff members began organizing the papers when they heard the rush of wind coming through. "Excuse me, sorry I'm late," said a male voice, causing the 2 workers working the front desk to look up in surprise. "My ride was late, and so I just got here." While one of the other members had been ready to just reject the boy's application since he was late, and he didn't want to do any more work, the other member quickly jumped in and helped the boy process his paperwork before pointing out where he needed to go. "Thank you," said the boy before quickly walking towards the location. "Why did you help him?" asked the worker grumpily. "That's more work for us, and he was late. He caught us before we finished cleaning up," replied the other. "Plus, it looks like he rushed in here too. Did you not see his windswept hair and the torn clothing? Boy looked like he rushed here from training in the mountains or something. He was probably training hard for this exam and miscalculated how long it would take to get back here. I do hope he has some extra clothes." The grumpy worker merely huffed as they finished their cleanup. Izuku took a deep breath, relieved to have made it in time. The trip through the training realm had been no joke, and true to his teacher's words, his hands had been bloodied for the first time, though he could claim it was self-defense. Flashback. It had happened so fast for him. At one point, he had found a scroll for a movement technique, and was ready to put it away when a group of people rudely barged into the cave he was in. There, the leader of the group proclaimed he was the holy son of a sect named Lao Feng, and that everything in the cave belonged to him by right. Everyone within his group was wearing red and orange robes. Izuku was quite blinded by the arrogance the man was displaying but chose not to push it. It was just a movement technique that couldn't be compared to ghost perplexing steps of the Tang sect. However, everything changed when the man began eyeing a girl in the group he had joined to travel together with. Apparently, the girl was a descendant of one of Yang Kai's friends, named Su Ming, and so he decided to join her group when given the offer. Su Yang was the older brother who was with them. You'll be my woman for the week before I decide to keep you or not," grinned the young master lecherously, pointing at Su Ming. That, of course, led to an argument that escalated into conflict quite quickly. Everybody had their own pride, and there was no way they were going to let one of their own sect members become a playboy for another sect, especially one of the major beauties of a sect. Everyone began fighting against each other. Izuku had at first tried to just disable his enemies, like a hero would in his world. But it soon became obvious if he tried to follow this path, it would end up leading to his own death. The first shock was when he felt someone in his group die from the spoiled young master, who cruelly attacked from behind. Following the Tao of life and death, it made it so much more poignant to him that he couldn't continue this path. It was at this point, young Kai's words resounded in him once more. "Cruelty to yourself if you show mercy to your enemies." With that, Izuku pulled out his handgun and shot his opponent in the head, who had been so surprised and mystified at the object in Izuku's hand that he didn't even put up a defense. Izuku partially shut his mind down. becoming numb to what he was doing as he killed his opponents. He fully used everything within his power, using his staff to block an attack, and utilizing the Tang sect hidden weapons to kill his opponents from dead angles. Soon enough, the arrogant young master was the only one left, sprawled on the ground while bleeding from his hand, an injury he had gotten from a dagger thrown by Izuku. His defensive techniques had been shattered from being continuously attacked. "Stop! Get away from me!" yelled Lao Feng as he crawled away. "You'll regret killing me. My sect will destroy all that you care for. If you help me leave this realm alive, I promise that none of you will be harmed." Of course, the man didn't intend to keep his word. As long as he escaped, he would make sure that this humiliation would be repaid tenfold, even though he was the one responsible for it. "What should we do?" asked one of the surviving fighters. "Kill him. He tried to humiliate us," barked another. "But we can't afford to offend his sect. It's stronger than ours," said another. While the group was arguing, Izuku instead stepped forward towards Lao Feng, his hair shading over his eyes. "Don't come near me," warned Lao Feng, "otherwise you'll forfeit your life." Lao Feng, however, had his first objective on Izuku and those mysterious techniques he displayed. He wanted Izuku captured and tortured, and all those techniques pried off his body before finally killing him. "With all those techniques and weapons, then I can become a god of this world," thought Lao Feng. Izuku, however, was still in a killing trance. He was more sensitive to life and death from his path, and he could see just how many deaths the man in front of him had caused. His whole aura reeked of the death of other people that he had caused for his own gratification, and not in battle. While his masters had death in their hands, none of them had been for selfish purposes like Lao Feng before him. With that in mind, Izuku immediately drew a formation that locked Lao Feng within it. Next, grabbing another weapon within his sealed world, pointed it at Lao Feng's body. He had grabbed the powder-shooting star of the Tang sect weapons and shot Lao Feng in the body, specifically at the liver and pancreas. Lao Feng tried to scream, but felt his voice being trapped in his throat as he couldn't move. The poison within the metal needles had paralyzed his body as he began to bleed heavily. Izuku turned around and left, leaving it to chance whether he would live or not. While he could not escape easily, other people could come and go, and considering how arrogant the man had been, Izuku had no doubt others would take advantage of this. Whether his luck would hold or karma would come was up to fate. "Izuku, isn't this a little cruel?" asked one of Izuku's group members cautiously. Suyong shook his head. "I support his actions. Lao Feng deserves everything that's coming to him. How many people has he killed because of his spoiled attitude? Let fate decide his future." The others left Lao Feng to his fate, turning their backs on him and never looking back. Lao Feng glared at them, thinking of all the ways he would torture them. He was the chosen holy son of his sect. It was his fate and destiny to stand above others. Everybody else was just his plaything. Then he heard something breathing heavily from above, as well as a rather disgusting smell. Lao Feng looked up in time to see a hideous-looking dog looking at him as if he was his next meal. Saliva dripped down onto Lao Feng, which burned his skin. Lao Feng wanted to scream, but his voice was still paralyzed. He didn't say anything else before the monster roared, with its mouth snapping down onto Lao Feng. Izuku and the others made it out of the training realm relatively unharmed as the portal closed behind them. They were the few lucky ones, though. Izuku looked around to see other groups bleeding heavily, if not missing limbs. Another one was clearly poisoned, based on the fact he had green veins popping out from his neck. Izuku numbly took everything in, still in a slight trance. Within him, the hero side of him would have gone to help everyone. But the cultivator side of him won over, stating that these people had no relations to him and that it was a dog-eat-dog world. Plus, most of them were already being treated by their own sect, so it was out of Izuku's hands. Not to mention they wouldn't welcome any stranger's offer, as it would be too suspicious. They wouldn't trust strangers who might try to screw them over. However, Izuku glanced over to the poisoned disciple, who was beginning to convulse. "Master, nothing we do is helping," shouted another disciple of the poisoned man. The master gritted his teeth as he began channeling Kai into the poisoned disciple, but all it did was prolong the suffering. Unless he was given the antidote, the man had no chance of living. "It's all my fault," cried a female disciple. "Senior brother protected me from some beasts, and one of them managed to sting him with its stinger. He waved it off, saying he was fine, but it wasn't until the end that we noticed it was poison. A sting. Only one beast inside the realm has a poison stinger. The orange demonic bee," said the master in a dramatic voice. "Only one flower within that realm can combat against its venom. The blessed blue crystal drop. But such a flower is rare, even within the realm. We can only hope that someone has it right now, but even then, it may be impossible to get it due to how valuable it is. Not only is it the cure to this venom, but it is the main ingredient for a pill to help anyone break into the immortal ascension realm." The sect disciples could only mourn the loss of their most talented and beloved disciple brother, as they knew nobody would be so kind to just give it to them. It was just how this world went. Maybe if I sell my body, I can get the flower for senior brother, said the female disciple as she looked down at her body. She had very large breasts and a curvy figure, though a rather plain face. Still, if it meant being able to save her senior brother disciple whom she loved very much and had wanted to save her first time with him, then it would be. Here, have him take this immediately. And he'll live, said a voice as a flower was suddenly thrust in front of her. The female disciple blinked before looking up to see Izuku holding the said blessed blue crystal drop in front of her. What are you waiting for? Isn't time of the essence? Smiled Izuku kindly. In the end, his hero side shone through, even for just this moment. Thank you, thanked the female disciple as she took the flower, afraid Izuku would take it back, only to see him make no move to do so. So she quickly scurried to where the sect master was doing his best to stabilize the poisoned disciple, showing the flower in her hand. Although Izuku had given her the flower, it wasn't the only one he had in his sealed world. He had found it before meeting up with a group, and so had taken it and already taken the seeds to plant more of it. So it was an excess that he could afford to give. Before they could feed the petals to the poisoned disciple, a voice rang out. Hold it. That plant is mine by right. Everyone turned to see a man wearing burning red and bright orange robes who made that declaration. No, this plant is for my senior brother. It was Gi, exclaimed the female, only for the sect master to suddenly cover her mouth. This plant was found by a disciple of my sect. Naturally, it belongs to my disciple in the sect. You have no voice over this, said the sect master. It was easy to see that the sect master had worded this so as not to involve Izuku in the whole scandal to protect him. Wait a minute, friends. I have one request to all of you. Please support and give kudos to the author and make sure to comment. Love from Saiyan Fanfics YT. So he will not feel any regrets for giving us permission to upload his fanfics, and the fanfic link is in the description. Now let's continue the fanfic. I, Sect Master Lao Dong of the Free Passion Sect, will have a voice over anything I desire, shouted Lao Dong. It is my rightful place among the heavens. All those who argue will be silenced. And where is my sect's holy son? While other sects glared at him, they couldn't help but lower their heads. The Free Passion Sect was currently the strongest in the area they were in right now, and any wrong move would result in their own extermination. And yet this sect was rather dark, as they used other human lives for their own cultivation resources. Nobody knows. Then I'll start killing everyone here until I get an answer, declared Lao Dong. His Kai flared up, along with all the other members of the Free Passion Sect that he had brought with him. It was easy to see his group was the strongest out of the others. While others responded in kind, they were outnumbered. Then one of the members that Izuku had been a part of suddenly rushed out before pointing to Izuku. He's the one responsible. He also took out the blessed blue crystal drop from his artifact. Mengzhi, you fucking coward, roared Suyang. How could you betray someone so brazenly? We went through life and death together. I want to live, spat Mengzhi, Senior. That man, Izuku Midoriya, is a rogue cultivator. He isn't in any sect. I'm sure he has plenty of valuables stored up. Good, good, grinned Lao Dong. You may join our sect if you wish. We could use upstanding men like you. Who do you want to bring with you? I'm sure a young man like you has needs. I can help you with that. Mengzhi turned as he began leering at Su Ming, who immediately hid behind her brother. Very well. But first, we deal with Izuku character, laughed Lao Dong before locking his eyes on Izuku. Boy, Kato, and give up all your valuables, and maybe we'll leave your corpse intact. Izuku obviously refused, standing his ground. Against such vicious evil, he would not turn his head away. Not to mention he could sense these men practiced a rather dark form of cultivation. HMPH, this king was very generous to you, only for you to refuse toast, so I can only force you to drink a forfeit, declared Lao Dong before firing a Kai-filled palm at Izuku while his other members used their divine sense to lock Izuku onto the ground. Izuku stood his ground, raising his fist up and winding it back. Using everything he had, Izuku fired a Kai-infused punch at the palm strike. Star Explosion Fist, roared Izuku, using a technique that amplified his own Kai by several times. The attack slammed into the palm strike, but dissipated as the palm strike still went through. However, it severely weakened the attack as Izuku raised his arms to protect himself. The palm strike slammed into Izuku in the ground underneath him, forming a large crater. However, Izuku still stood there standing, albeit bleeding from all orifices. Who haven't died yet? Then have another, said Lao Dong whimsically, only to suddenly dodge an attack. You dare bully a junior, roared the sect master that Izuku had given the flower to. Fight someone who can take you on. The sect master launched himself towards Lao Dong, only to have his path blocked by the masters and elders of the Free Passion Sect. Coward, come fight me if you dare, roared the sect master, only to be ignored. HMPH, to think such a cockroach like you would live after my attack, sneered Lao Dong as he looked down at Izuku. I admit your abilities at such a young age are quite formidable, but it doesn't matter to me who was chosen by the heavens themselves. This king will become the one who rules this planet. I take great pleasure in destroying and denying other potentials outside the sect. Now then, boy, any last words? Only that you'll regret your words, coughed out Izuku before standing tall. You aimed your words at my master's wife. He won't forgive you for that. HMPH, just a rogue cultivator with a rogue master. What can a lone man do to me? Shouted Lao Dong as he charged forward, intending to rip Izuku apart limb by limb via brute force. A reply came with a slap to Lao Dong's face, sending him hurtling into the other masters and elders of the Free Passion sect like a bowling ball to pins. This emperor can do a lot for not only speaking ill of my wife, but for bullying my disciple, said Yong-kai with a smoking palm. Be lucky I only hit you with a light slap. How is that considered light? You sent him flying into others, shouted bystanders in their minds at this scene. Izuku, are you all right? Asked Yong-kai. Could be better, groaned Izuku as he managed to pull out a healing pill to eat. Good, I was watching your fight against Lao Dong, smiled Yong-kai as he patted Izuku's head. Although he's stronger than you, you stood your ground and didn't give up your moral dignity. That's more than all your masters can really ask for. Now heal up, and we have another location to go to before your exam. Normally, I'd leave this force alone for you to take care of in the future, but you'll be busy and unable to deal with it, so I'll take care of it. Plus, as you mentioned, he's going to regret trying to take Xia Ningchang's place as Star Master of this world. With that, Yong-kai turned towards the group of masters, each one helping Lao Dong up. HMPH, a lucky and cowardly shot, spat out Lao Dong. This master will. The Free Passion sect. Sounds similar to the Free and Unfettered sect and the Seeking Passion sect that I once knew, interrupted Yong-kai. You'll share the same fate as them. The bystanders were expecting some sort of epic fight to spill out, and were already in the process of rushing away. Before Lao Dong could do anything, or any of the other members of the Free Passion sect, Yong-kai merely held his hand up, gesturing for them to come at him. Die, roared Lao Dong as he threw a Kai-infused palm strike at Yong-kai, only to watch in shock as Yong-kai merely blew a puff of air from his mouth to instantly disperse it. Then Yong-kai clasped his hand into a fist. Everyone who saw this scene blinked in confusion, only to rear back in horror a second later as everyone who had been charging at Yong-kai suddenly swelled up and exploded into a gory mess, killing all of them in one breath. HMPH, mere flies who don't know the immensity between heaven and earth, scoffed Yong-kai as his other hand waved into the air, causing any artifacts or goods from the dead bodies to fly up into the air and into a storage ring Yong-kai produced. When all was done, Yong-kai used his divine sense to look into what had been gathered, sifting out some valuable medicinal materials to keep before tossing the ring over to Su Yang, who caught it with a look of surprise on his face. Don't think too much about it, said Yong-kai, just keep up the good work. You'll take care of the rest, won't you? Su Yang nodded, his eyes focused on the traitorous Mengju, who was sweating in fear now. Just as Yong-kai was about to take Izuku, the sect master who had tried to help Izuku quickly came up to them. Tagging along him was the poisoned disciple, who seemed to have recovered, as well as the female disciple. Thank you for helping my disciple, thanked the sect master. Is there anything I can do to repay such generosity? Please, let us help you, said the now cured disciple. My life is at your service. Izuku quickly waved it off, saying it was nothing. Though the flower was valuable, in the eyes of Yong-kai or anyone in the higher realms of Kai, it was next to worthless for them. If you really want to help, be prepared to help High Heaven Pavilion when it's time, said Yong-kai, pointing over to Su Yang's group. While surprised, the master nodded as Yong-kai began to float up in the air, taking Izuku with him. Now then, we must go. I can see that you've bloodied your hands for the first time, but to make sure you can hold back your killing intent, Tang-san has already made preparations, said Yong-kai before flying up towards the sky. Right before he left though, he looked over to where the Free Passion sect was and swatted the air in that direction. At the Free Passion sect's location, they didn't get a chance to mourn the loss of their master nor even hear news about it when a giant Kai-infused palm strike slammed right into the area, destroying all the buildings and disciples in it, leaving just an empty crater. Flashback ends. Izuku took a deep breath, regaining his calm. He had spent another 2 weeks with Tang-san and controlling his newly found bloodlust. 2 weeks wouldn't have been enough, but considering 2 of his masters were able to control the flow of time, 2 weeks became 6 months, giving him enough time to temper it back down. It was there that Izuku learned how to play the harp, and still kept one within the sealed world just to keep practicing. Hope Ochako and the others didn't miss out just because I was late, muttered Izuku to himself as he made his way to his assigned classroom. Izuku entered to see a group of students all seated, waiting nervously for the written portion of the exam. Many of them glared at Izuku for making such a last-minute entrance for such an important exam. But Izuku ignored them. Having faced death, such glares did not affect him. Izuku sat down just as a staff member entered the room with the test packets in hand. The packets were soon passed out, and upon the staff's order, everyone began tackling the problems. Izuku smiled as he went through the questions with ease. Being a cultivator in addition to learning formation, alchemy, and smithing, it meant having a near photographic memory and recall. Izuku quickly began writing down his answers. One test taker that was sitting next to Izuku glanced around, confident in his ability before making a big show of flipping over his test to the next page. It's a cheap tactic, but an effective one to make others think they're too slow and try to rush through, only to make mistakes, thought the test taker, lower the chances of others making it while raising mine. He had skipped a few questions that he couldn't answer right away, but he made a note to get back to it. He glanced around just for his eyes to land on Izuku rapidly writing on his test paper, already hitting the bottom before quietly flipping it over before resuming writing. The test taker's eyes bulged out when he saw Izuku continue writing without breaks, answering every question on the paper. To make it worse, Izuku wasn't even making a show or doing it on purpose. No, I can't let him show me up, thought the test taker as he quickly blazed through the questions he knew he could answer, but he kept taking a peek at Izuku, who was writing through the test without pause. He paled when he saw Izuku quietly flip over to the next page. His plan to shock the other students backfired on him as he sat there in shock. It took him 20 minutes before he realized he had been staring blankly at his test paper without writing anything. Shit, thought the test taker as he tried to regain the lost time, all while glaring at Izuku for making him lose valuable time. Izuku ignored him and focused on his test. He hadn't even noticed that the test taker had blanked out, or really noticed him at all. The test started at 9 a.m. and ended at 12 p.m. sharp, leaving the exam takers 3 hours to complete the test. This was just day 1 of the 2 days of testing that needed to be done, though. After that, they would be excused for lunch for 2 hours if one was participating in the hero physical portion of the exam. 1 hour for lunch and another hour to properly digest while also giving students time to recover from mental fatigue. However, one of the rules before taking the tests was that all cell phones were confiscated before the test, and were not given until the day ended. So trying to connect to friends within the large university for lunch would be too much of a hassle, especially since they weren't allowed to leave their exam rooms until further notice. The good part at least was that students were able to have a nutritious and delicious lunch courtesy of UA, catering to the specific dietary needs or wants. Izuku took this time to meditate and cultivate privately, adjusting his mental state while waiting for his lunch order. Taking some tea leaves out, Izuku made some tea to help him relax and recover. While he had his eyes shut, he heard footsteps coming his way. "Hey, you're taking the exam for the hero course, right?" said a rather haughty voice. Izuku opened his eyes to see a rather chubby man with a huge lollipop in his hand, surrounded by what could be said to be 2 generic bald goons. "Yes, can I help you?" asked Izuku. "Oh, I'm just a fellow exam taker who's looking out for others," said the teenager. "My name is Wakaba. I participated in the recommendation exam, and was so close to getting that recommendation, only to fall short. So here I am to grace my presence with you commoners." Izuku closed his eyes while rolling his eyeballs while Wakaba continued. "I'm only here to advise fellow students just how difficult the physical portion is. Only those with the proper quirks can hope to pass. Otherwise, you'll just suffer a humiliating defeat, both physically and mentally. I have a strength enhancement that'll only grow in time. I'm certainly slotted for a spot in the hero course because of it." "He's so strong," echoed the goons, waving flags behind the teenager that had somehow been procured from somewhere. "But there are too many students all hoping to get some sort of lucky break," sighed Wakaba, "so I feel like it is my duty to dissuade those dreamers before they get hurt and direct their efforts to something more productive. You look like a bright man who would be more productive in another field, so why don't you do yourself a favor and drop out of the practical exam? Here, I can help you tell the examiner that you want to drop out. Don't be shy now, it's good to have dreams, but you have to face reality." Izuku sighed as he knew what Wakaba was trying to do: lower the number of people attending to raise his own chances. He ignored Wakaba's pro-offered arm, deciding to ignore the boy completely. His last words also hit a nerve a little, but with proper breathing and mental control, Izuku pushed his anger away. "Hey, don't you dare look down at Wakaba's generous offer," shouted Guna now. "Now, some people are just fools chasing after dreams they can never fulfill," said Wakaba calmly, "so then it's only up to us to make sure they don't get hurt. Grab him and lock him up in a room." Before the goons could obey, a floating eye and mouth suddenly intervened. "Hey, fat dumbass," shouted the mouth. "Don't try to pull shit like this, Kaba Baka." "My name is Wakaba Ka," shouted Wakaba. "Your name has the words Kaba and Baka, so it fits," replied the voice with a shrugged tone, "but don't think you can pull this shit here. I'm already getting a teacher here. TCH, fine. "Let's go, boys," scoffed Wakaba as he and his goons left. "Sorry about that. The guy's an idiot," said the floating mouth with the eye looking at Izuku. "Give me a second. The rest of my body is catching up." A few seconds later, a teenage girl with green hair caught up, missing her mouth and an eye. Said missing pieces floated back to the girl before inserting themselves back into place like a puzzle piece. "Yo, name's Satsuna Takage. greeted Setsuna. Us green-haired folks have to look out for each other. Izuku smiled as he waved back before introducing himself. He could tell Setsuna wasn't one to try to take advantage of others. Anyways, it's hard to believe that Fat-ass took part in the recommendation exam, but it's true. However, he got last place on everything. Laughed Setsuna. Lord knows how he even got in. His parents probably bribed a few people to get that recommendation letter, only to fail. Does that mean you were also in it, too? Asked Izuku. Yep, nodded Setsuna. Was so close, too. Got 5th place overall. Endeavor's kid was there, which was obvious he was a shoo-in since he's his kid. But the wind dude and girl who could create shit was not a joke either. I almost made it to the 4th slot until some guy suddenly popped out from the ground in front of me and took the last slot. She probably meant Momo, thought Izuku to himself before replying, that's a shame. But at least you're prepared for this physical portion, right? You bet I am. Grinned Setsuna. Been working out and working on some special moves. But I won't tell you anything yet. Still competition and all. As Setsuna stuck out her tongue, Izuku chuckled. Fair enough. Good luck to the both of us. Yeah, cheered Setsuna. Wanna hang out for a little while we wait for our food and stuff? It'd be easier to relax for the test. I don't mind, shrugged Izuku, though I might go silent for some time just to meditate. Fair enough, nodded Setsuna. Since we're getting to know each other, what's your quirk like? You can already see from mine, but just in case, I can split up my body parts like so. Izuku nodded in interest, not having seen such abilities or quirks as so. Then again, he did remain quite isolated during most of his middle school and high school years. A transformation quirk. That's quite impressive, praised Izuku. You must have trained hard to have been recommended. It's nothing really, blushed Setsuna. I call it lizard tail splitter. So what's yours? Izuku hummed for a second before replying, I'm quirkless. Setsuna blinked before replying, ha, good joke, before realizing that Izuku wasn't laughing when she trailed off. You serious? Asked Setsuna, getting a nod in reply. Wow, that's bossy of you. I know UA University is one of the few universities that admits quirkless people into their hero course, but everyone treats that part like a joke or a publicity stunt. You're really prepared to do this? I am, nodded Izuku. Alright then best of luck, declared Setsuna. Since you're obviously committed to this, then I better see you in the hero course. Of course, smiled Izuku. The two began talking to each other for a bit before Izuku mentioned that due to his status, he was able to request for a metal pole as a weapon. This, however, was overheard by Wakaba, who began grinning as he went somewhere with an evil smirk. Soon, everyone was gathered in the huge auditorium, where Present Mike was waiting to give the introduction. Staff members were going around, reminding everyone to head to the auditorium. An announcement was made 10 minutes prior to the meeting to remind everyone that they needed to head to the auditorium or risk disqualification. There was an incident where one student was pointed in the wrong direction by someone, but it was quickly resolved. The doors were closed, and anyone left outside was disqualified immediately. Izuku looked around as he sat down, noticing Setsuna, who waved at him. He saw Katsuki sitting next to two teenagers, one with red hair and the other with pink skin and pink hair. Maybe his classmates, murmured Izuku, remembering Katsuki had been sent to a different school after the Aldera scandal. Katsuki seemed to notice his stare and looked back at Izuku for 2 seconds before flipping him off with the middle finger. While rude, to him, it was equivalent of him acknowledging someone and saying hi. Of course, the two teenagers next to him began scolding him, but Izuku was surprised to see Katsuki not yelling back at the other two or calling them extras, an improvement from his previous attitude. Izuku continued to scan the area, using Purple Demon Eye to enhance his vision as well as see through the dark while also using his Kai Sense to locate Ochako and the others. He found them assigned more towards the front of the auditorium while he was in the back area. Izuku decided to just memorize where they sat so he could meet up with them later. Welcome to my live show. Everybody say hey, shouted Present Mike before cupping his ear towards the crowd. Hey, shouted Izuku with a humorous tone, ignoring everyone's glare as they turned around to glare at him. Ochako and the others turned to see Izuku before smiling and waving at him, glad to see he could make it. I like you, listener, grinned Present Mike as he pointed to Izuku. Just for that, you're gonna get a shout out in my next radio show. Now why can't everyone be like that? Present Mike looked around before noticing quite a few glaring at Izuku and frowned before secretly tapping his pody. Unbeknownst to them, the test had already started, and right in front of Present Mike were the seats assigned to each student. Public image was a thing after all, and if a hero candidate was too busy glaring at other heroes and not listening to his instructions, points would be docked off. It made him happy that someone responded, but he understood if nobody would respond as they were too nervous. But glaring and insulting someone who responded to him would result in point deductions. Present Mike cleared his throat to catch everyone's attention again before continuing. Listen up, examinees. I'm going to give you the lowdown on how this'll go down. Are you ready? Noticing a few still glaring, He tapped the podium, highlighting the seats before deducting points. He had already memorized where each seat number was. Present Mike then proceeded to explain how the exam would work, the television behind him playing to help illustrate his point. There were 7 examination sites, meaning they would all be randomized into different. Mike continued his explanation, using Super Mario Bros. Villains to help illustrate the point system. So your goal is to rack up a high score. And don't even think about attacking other competitors directly or any other anti-hero stuff, cause that's against the rule, capus. Once Present Mike finished the explanation, he waited a few seconds to let it sink in. Then he noticed a student stand up and raise his hand. "Excuse me, may I ask a question?" stated the student, standing tall with combed black hair and a rather rectangular figure, as his jaw, glasses, and eyes were all rectangular shaped. Present Mike nodded, letting the student continue his question. "On the printout, there are clearly 4 types of villains labeled. If that was a misprint, then UA, the most prominent school in Japan, should be ashamed of this mistake. We, the examinees, are here because we wish to become prominent and exemplary heroes." Okay, waved Present Mike. "Thanks for the speech, Examinee 7111. For you see, that 4th villain is worth 0 points. He's more of an obstacle, so to speak. Ever play Super Mario Bros? I doubt it, since it's rather retro." Sadly true, as the parent company went down during the time of the Quirk upheaval. It never recovered, as fewer people wanted to play video games about a normal human who gained power-ups via mushrooms or random items. Nor did they want to acknowledge a good game was created by quirkless people, though that could be attributed to people who sympathized with the MLA, trying to exterminate any products made by quirkless humans before stealing, rebranding it for themselves. However, it did still have a loyal fanbase with the older generations, passing down to the younger generations, though the numbers dwindled. Remember those thwomps in the game? There's a thing like that in each area. Their gimmick is that they'll rampage when it gets crowded. It's not impossible to defeat, but there's no reason to defeat it, either. In fact, we've recently decided that anyone who decides to face it might lose all their points they gain. No point in risking your chances here, right? Gotta make the smart decisions. I recommend avoiding it. Any other questions before I finish up? Present Mike gave the audience a chance to ask, and someone did stand up. A light was shone on him, revealing him to be one of Wakaba's goon. "I have a question in regards to the qualifications of some of the students," said the teenager before turning around and pointing at Izuku. "Such as the fact that a quirkless student is taking such a prestige exam meant for the chosen for is an insult to us all. You should leave and let a more worthy person take your place. All you would do is take up room, and even if you somehow managed to get points, no doubt you would have stolen them from more finer people with unheroic tactics." The teenager seemed to beam in pride as he saw a majority of students looking at Izuku, either out of disgust or sizing him up as worthless. He did notice some glaring at him, but he excused them as pathetic weaklings who were too empathetic. He suddenly noticed the beam of light was on him, but before he could react, a voice rang out. "Everyone freeze now," shouted Present Mike, causing all the students to freeze in shock, though their facial expressions still frozen. Instantly, Present Mike's finger was already dancing upon the podium screen, taping all the seat numbers that were glaring at Izuku with disgust. Instantly, all of them received deduction points, though he was saving the best part for last. "Now then, Examinee 1337. We as the university are the ones that decide who can attend the hero course. That means we will not reject anyone who is willing to go through the exam just on someone's quirk status. We will, however, reject ones that don't fit our motto." The teenager seemed to misunderstand something, so Present Mike cleared it up. "Examinee 1337, you can leave now. Your application to UA University has been denied. We don't tolerate that sort of behavior on this campus. Security, escort him out." Under the eyes of all the students, they watched in shock as the goon was dragged out of his chair and out of the auditorium by some staff members and robots. The goon himself was in shock as he was dragged out, and only towards the end did he begin to struggle, but it was too late. Present Mike gave all of them a look, causing most of them to freeze up. "The exam started the minute I began my announcements, so I'd be careful if I were you all." Izuku couldn't help but give Present Mike a grateful look. Years of teachers never helping him throughout his elementary and middle school years made him lose hope that teachers in this world would even give him a second glance. The only teachers he respected were his cultivation teachers. Present Mike flashed a grin at the boy. He had never been a fan of the latest attitude the generation was bringing in regards to someone's quirk. A quirk was just a quirk, nothing more. It didn't define who you were or your place in the world. Plus, he loved stuff from the quirkless era. It was when imagination and innovation shone. Just look at what they could create without quirks, especially video games. They couldn't even compare to the current record holders. With a flourish, he decided to finish this up. "Well, that's enough from me. Finally, I'll give you listeners a present, our school motto. The hero Napoleon Bonaparte once said, 'A true hero is someone who overcomes life's misfortune.' His sunglasses dipped down so he could leer at them for a second. Now go beyond, plus ultra. Are you all ready? Present Mike cupped his ears towards the crowd for a reply, and was not disappointed when he heard Izuku say yes, along with a few others. With a sweep of his hand, the screen behind him changed, and a small animation with the letter plus ultra appeared before them all. Now then, good luck suffering. As they all began to exit the auditorium and into their assigned buses, Izuku managed to meet up with Itsuka, Ochako, and Yui. Where were you? Huffed Ochako, her cheeks puffed up. We were waiting at the entrance until the last minute. Sorry, training much longer than expected, apologized Izuku. I made it in at the very last second. You better be sorry, said Itsuka. You owe us cuddles and other things for putting us on a dry spell for so long. Yui merely held out a V sign in agreement. It was only a month, sweat dropped Izuku. Then you've spoiled us, don't complain, swatted Itsuka. Before they could talk anymore, an announcement rang to remind all examinees to quickly board the bus or forfeit the exam. The girls gave Izuku one last hug before rushing to their own buses, as none of them were in the same exam site as Izuku. Soon, 100 students were exiting the bus and standing in front of the entrance. Most were amazed at the sight and the construction of a mock city. Not to mention there were 7 more like this. UA did not skimp out on their buildings, and even had the latest earthquake dampening measures built in. So, you seemed friendly with those girls, said Setsuna cheerfully as she walked next to Izuku. Yay, they're close friends who knew me before all this, and they knew I'm quirkless, replied Izuku. That's sweet, nodded Setsuna, though they seem closer than that. Something you want to confess. Izuku laughed lightly before a hand descended down on his shoulders before he could give a reply. Izuku looked back to see it was Examine 7111 who was glaring at him slightly. What are you doing here? Demanded the student. This isn't some field trip. Were you placed here to hinder others from doing their best in the exam? Are you really quirkless, to bring our guards down? Or are you actually an examinee? In which case, don't you know how dangerous it is? Only the best of the best are able to attend UA. And you want to do so without any quirks? That's rather courageous and yet also insipid, to think a person could get into such a prestigious school without powers. Izuku didn't reply, but rather stared at the hand that was on his shoulders. Realizing that he was being rude by putting his hand on a complete stranger without permission, the examinee quickly withdrew his hand. And your attitude? While everyone was nervous inside the auditorium, you had the gall to yell out loud. Were you trying to disrupt other examinees' focus? That is shameful, said the examinee while chopping the air with his hand. And you're not doing the same to me, replied Izuku, causing the teenager to freeze. You come here accusing me of all those things. One might think you're trying to eliminate the competition while trying to justify it. And like Present Mike said, the exam began the moment we stepped into our seats. You're not a judge, but rather an examinee like I am. You have no right to say what I can or cannot do. I might have gotten extra points because of my willingness to obey what the instructor said, while you might have lost because you refused to wait and listen to all his instructions, instead barged in, accusing the school of such a mistake. And the teachers are watching now. You might have also lowered your chances with this conversation. In case you forgot, someone's already been rejected earlier. The examinee blue screened, unable to deny his words while trying to process everything. Seeing he wouldn't be bothered anymore, Izuku left him alone. A bit harsh there, weren't you? Asked Setsuna. Was I wrong? Reposted Izuku, to which Setsuna couldn't help but shrug her shoulders. Izuku hadn't done anything wrong. True, in case you're wondering, that person's name is Idatenya. He was in the recommendation exam with me but didn't pass. But he was pretty impressive with his quirk. Just a bit inflexible, commented Setsuna. Izuku got in line to pick up his own support gear, which was just a metal staff. While Izuku had confidence in his own hands, having a staff would give him a little extra reach and also let him train in using his staff some more. The staff member dispensed the support gear for students who had done their paperwork for such requests. Ones that would help support their quirk from malfunctioning were usually accepted, though ones that amplified a quirk's power to an unreasonable degree were disqualified when said quirk was already effective. A prime example was another student who needed his belt to effectively use his quirk, as it acted as a focus point. Without it, he couldn't use it. Izuku had his paperwork submitted and approved by the UA, and so was waiting for his own staff. The said staff member had been giving out smiles and compliments to those who had picked up their stuff, but when it came to Izuku, his face immediately turned 180 from smile to disgust. Still, Izuku ignored it as he held out his paper for his staff. Sorry, don't have it. You'll have to go out without one, said the staff bluntly, not even glancing at Izuku's paper. What? That's bullshit, shouted Setsuna from the side. Not my problem. He clearly didn't put in the correct paperwork, scoffed the said staff member. Next, stop wasting time and space. In fact, stop wasting everyone's life and go home. While some people bristled at this injustice, many others ignored it as they were focused on their own exam. If it raised their own chances of getting into UA, They would ignore the convenient injustice done to others, especially a quirkless one. Well, haha, something wrong there, laughed out a voice. Izuku and Setsuna turned around to see Wakaba walking towards them with a metal staff in his own hands. Oi, what the hell? Your quirk doesn't need a staff to work, shouted Setsuna. I filled out the paperwork, said Wakaba smugly. You really shouldn't complain to a future hero candidate. What's wrong, quirkless freak? Did you misplace your staff? Tell you what, I'm feeling mighty generous today, and I'll lend you this staff if you lick my shoes. Wakaba laughed, as did one of his goons who had coincidentally been placed at the same exam site as he did. Most of the other students pretended to see nothing wrong was going on, not wanting to get involved in the situation. However, not everyone ignored the plight, even if Izuku was numb to the whole thing. Izuku was ready to walk away and prepare for the exam with his fists when, "Excuse-moi, do you have the paperwork for that staff?" asked another examinee wearing a belt. "Huh, who are you?" asked Wakaba. "Apologies for the late introduction, but my name is Ayama Yuga," introduced the named Yuga while posing for some reason. "If you have the correct paperwork, then there should be a number corresponding with the said support gear, just like my fabulous belt." Yuga pointed at his belt, where the number 7 was written on it. It was written with a special ink made from a quirk that wouldn't wash away for 1 week. All numbers had been written 3 days ago, matching to the paperwork. "I see the number on that staff is 33. Should that staff belong to you, then your paperwork should have the number 33, would it not?" questioned Yuga. While Wakaba began sweating, Izuku glanced at his own paperwork to see that he was number 33, meaning the staff was his. That also meant Wakaba had somehow stolen it from UA, though the question was exactly how. "Hey, Midoriya's number is 33. That means that staff was his already, you fat idiot," shouted Setsuna as she popped one eye away to look at Izuku's paper. "Maybe it was a mistake. I got this staff first, so it's mine," said Wakaba. "Not my fault that UA failed on their part. I find it outrageous that UA would fail on that," said Tenya, who had finally broken out of his blue screen. "There is also no first-come first-served basis on this. If you have the proper paperwork, then you should be able to pull it out to show that you submitted a request for a staff as well. See this paperwork? Midoriya should be getting that staff, not you," said Setsuna as she jabbed the paperwork in front of them after asking Izuku permission for it. "I bet you didn't even fill one out and somehow grabbed his for yourself after what you tried to do." Wakaba flustered before the staff member suddenly snatched the said paper and ripped it into pieces in front of their eyes. "What paperwork? I don't see any paperwork," said the staff member. "You piece of shit," shouted Setsuna while Tenya looked outraged at such blatant abuse of power. "Careful what you say," taunted the staff member while Wakaba stuck his tongue from behind. "I have the power to expel you from the exam straight away if you push it too far." That was a bluff, but it was enough to get some of the examinees who wanted to help step back in fear. Others merely shrugged, enjoying the drama but not wanting to get involved. "Flocks of sheep willing to watch injustice done as long as it wasn't done to them," sighed Izuku within his mind. Setsuna was about to give the staff member a piece of her mind when Izuku grabbed her wrist. "Don't sweat it," said Izuku as he calmly pulled Setsuna back. "It's not like I really need it for this exam." Before she could question it, a loud "go" rang out as the doors opened. "Start." Immediately, the gates opened, and while the majority of examinees were confused, some were not. Wakaba was one of them, using his large size and weight to shove other examinees out of the way, and purposely into the ground hard as a way to eliminate the competition. He would use the excuse that he was eager and panicked when the instructor suddenly said start with no warning, and that the other examinees were just idling and in his way. "Heh. Good thing my uncle warned me about the sudden start," thought Wakaba before noticing someone was running in front of him. It was Izuku, who had already began running as soon as Present Mike said start. "Asshole, I'm not letting some quirkless freak stand in front of me," thought Wakaba as he raised his stolen staff. Wakaba tripped while putting all his strength on his swing, empowering it with his quirk, aiming for Izuku's skull. "Watch out," shouted Setsuna, who had also been running before detaching an eye to look around in time to see Wakaba's action. "Die," screamed Wakaba in his mind mercilessly. Who cared if he killed the examinee? He was just a quirkless freak who didn't know his proper place in this world. He had generously offered Izuku a way out. Now he needed to pay the price. Izuku looked as if he didn't notice before suddenly shifting his body, leaning back into the left, letting the rod harmlessly pass by him as it slammed into the ground. The asphalt cracked under the impact, causing a few chunks of asphalt and concrete to fly up into the air. Izuku suddenly shifted his weight, raising his right leg before kicking the floating pieces forward. The pieces could be heard whistling through the air as two one-point robots came out from the corner. Targ started the robot, only for the pieces to pierce right through its neck and eye, destroying them instantly. Izuku stayed calm as he began dashing forward once more after landing, leaving the shocked Wakaba standing there. Wakaba noticed that Izuku's eyes seemed to be glowing purple, but didn't think about it much. A few seconds later, Wakaba began shouting into the air, "Hey examiner, those points are mine, you hear? He stole my points. I was planning to swing my rod that is properly mine at the chunks I made and he stole it," shouted Wakaba. Wakaba would continue talking to the air for a minute before realizing he was wasting time, which led him to another rant that Izuku should be disqualified for distracting him, which made him waste his time even more. By the time he realized he should be going, he had already wasted 5 minutes, and with the exam being only 10 minutes long, he would need a miracle to catch up. During Wakaba's continued ranting, Izuku, along with everybody else, had ignored Wakaba ranting as they continued forward, trying to gather points. Just because he didn't have his requested staff didn't mean he couldn't be resourceful. There were plenty of resources to use, as UA never skimped on making a real city simulation. Izuku tore out a stop sign, using it as a weapon to smash a few robots before hurling it at another robot that was trying to sneak up on Yuga. Yuga heard something crashing behind, and quickly turned around in time to see the stop sign piercing through a villain bot's body, causing it to freeze. Yuga quickly blasted the villain bot away before his eyes traced over to Izuku, noticing his throwing position. "Mercy," shouted Yuga with a twinkle in his eyes. Izuku gave him a thumbs up before jumping, shifting his body into an arc kick as he dodged another villain bot trying to sneak up on him and smashing its head in. After smashing its head in, Izuku used it as a footstool to launch himself upwards, scaling a street light pole to give himself a higher vantage point to scout where to go next. "Wish I could use the grappling hook I made," muttered Izuku as he used Purple Demon Eye to enhance his view. He was referring to the Flying God Claw, but Izuku preferred the simple name over its flowery name. Still, Izuku didn't spend much time begrudging over it. He couldn't always depend on having it in his arsenal despite his artifact allowed him to do such a thing. Izuku launched himself towards some villain bots that had yet to be discovered, hiding in a corner to ambush their prey. Before the bots could react, Izuku tore one apart with his bare hands. The mysterious jade hands allowed him to harden his whole hands, allowing him to punch through steel with ease. Pulling his fist out, Izuku admired his now white and smoky hands before grabbing a piece of wreckage and hurling at a 3-point villain bot, lodging the piece into its head. Before it could react, Izuku slammed the launched piece with a palm strike, causing it to go deeper into its hard drive and destroying it. The other 2-point villain bot tried to stab Izuku with its stinger, only for Izuku to suddenly disappear from its sight. The bot barely had time to register anything before Izuku shut it down by slapping the red button that was hidden at the base of its neck. "So they do have another way to get points besides destroying it," muttered Izuku as he landed. He had noticed it when using Purple Demon Eye, having raised it to the detailed realm some time ago. In another room full of screens, the staff of UA along with supporting members were watching the examinees. Each testing arena had many cameras embedded so that it was impossible to not monitor each student. Not to mention there was a personal camera that each student was carrying in the form of a wristband that was mandated so they could also verify point scores, while eyes were naturally drawn to those with flashy quirks or more suitable for combat. Toshinori Yaga's eyes were scanning for someone in particular, someone with green hair and freckles. "Where is he?" pondered Toshinori as scanned through the screens, all while palming the bottle, still in his pocket. He never left without it, as a reminder of his own hypocrisy and to do better. "Any students catching your eyes?" asked Nezu, sitting right next to the currently emaciated All Might. As of right now, nobody besides Nezu and UAS head doctor, Chiyo Shuzenji, aka youthful heroine, recovery girl, knew that the very unhealthy and skinny man sitting within the judgment area was actually All Might. They only knew him as a special guest that Nezu had invited in. "Some," said Toshinori distractedly while scanning through the screens. "Something else distracting you?" asked Nezu. "Nothing important," replied Toshinori, "just something I have to do personally." Nezu understood that Toshinori would not clarify on the matter despite the fact that finding a successor should be the highest priority. It was personal for the man, and Nezu did not feel the need to pry open its secrets. For now, it took a while, but Toshinori finally found whom he was looking for. Discreetly, Toshinori pulled out a tablet that each judge was given and had it pull up the camera that it was currently filming. "Izuku Midoriya," murmured Toshinori to himself as he managed to find the name of the examinee he was watching. Toshinori witnessed Izuku going through the bots with ease despite not having a quirk. He noticed Izuku using anything on hand, including pieces of wreckage from the villain bots to rocks on the ground. "Resourceful," nodded Toshinori as he glanced up in time to see another examinee panicking as he needed time to recharge his quirk, something villains would certainly never let heroes do, perhaps because he doesn't have a quirk that he doesn't rely on it primarily. He uses anything and everything on hand, including his own body. He's not stuck on being a one-trick pony like a lot of the examinees are exhibiting. He's certainly more prepared than I was at his age. Finally, that idiot's moving, laughed an examiner, causing a few to glance over to see Wakaba starting to move. Idiot stood there for 5 minutes ranting up in the air. Did he forget that the exam's on a time limit? And that speech, oh man, if he became a hero, he might bore the villain to death with his monologue. Toshinori resumed watching Izuku tearing through another bot while providing another examinee an opening with a well-placed kick that shot a metal plate into the wheel of a 3-point villain bot, causing it to stall out, giving the examinee time to destroy it. Instead of thanking Izuku though, the examinee shouted that the point was his and ran off. Toshinori frowned, wondering if this exam was a proper measurement and attitude. It was different from his own, but then again, UA didn't have this sort of money to create such things until later, when Nezu became the dean. Though Izuku would be receiving rescue points for the assist, a hidden function of gaining points that had purposely been left out of Mike's speech. Toshinori glanced at a few others, who were commenting about some other students before noticing it was time to hit the Yaruki button. Izuku took a deep breath as he finished shutting down a 3-pointer villain bot before he heard Present Mike announce that there were 2 minutes left. Mentally adding everything up, Izuku calculated that he had roughly 50 points. He would have had more, but he did spend some time helping some other examinees from being ambushed or helped give them an opening. While some thanked him, others glared at him before stating he was an idiot. And the points were theirs before rushing off to find more villain bots. Izuku shrugged it off. They weren't his enemies, and a hero wouldn't let anyone be harmed if he could have done something to prevent it. Suddenly, the ground began to rumble as the 4th villain bot revealed itself, towering over the most of the buildings in the area. One stomp caused streets to fracture. One swipe made the winds howl in their ears. The most common reaction was to flee, and that was what the majority of students did. Only a few, such as Katsuki, dared to continue hunting more bots, confident in their own abilities to flee if necessary. Izuku turned to leave when he heard someone groan in pain. Quickly turning his head back, his ears and eyes found the source. Another examinee. A female with low curved pigtails and ear-length bangs parted to the side was on the ground, her head bleeding. A stray rock had slammed into her head, leaving her dazed and confused. Izuku didn't hesitate to rush towards the girl, passing by Tenya, who paused to wonder why Izuku wasn't running like the others. His eyes traced down the road before seeing a hurt examinee. At that moment, Tenya hesitated. He was sure that with his speed, he could reach the girl faster than Izuku, but was it worth possibly losing his points and his chances at UA? When that question resounded in his head, Tenya focused on Izuku for a second. There was no trace of hesitation in his eyes or face. He was helping the girl regardless of what the outcome would be. Izuku reached over to the hurt examinee, examining her injuries before quickly lifting up her bridal style. "What are you doing?" slurred the examinee, but Izuku ignored her feeble protests as he quickly carried her away. "I'll take her to safety." "I'm faster," offered Tenya as he shook off his hesitation. Izuku nodded as he passed her over to him, not wanting to argue over pride. It was one thing to be proud of something. It was another thing if it hurt others. Izuku looked around to see if there were more injured before noticing Satsuna's head floating in the air. "Takage-san," shouted Izuku, getting her attention. "Do you see anyone injured?" Satsuna sent a hand and ear over to Izuku, raising up 2 fingers. "Show me the way." "I can help," said Izuku. Satsuna made her limbs move, floating towards an area where the rest of her body was gathering. Izuku quickly followed her, finding 2 more examinees groaning in pain. Checking them over, Izuku saw that they had minor injuries, a sprained ankle and a bruised wrist. Izuku quickly took the heavier examinee, putting his arm over his shoulder while Satsuna lifted the lighter one up. Luckily, the giant bot wasn't facing towards them, so they managed to escape without attracting its attention. As they were moving, Izuku felt his instincts blare out danger. Izuku quickly used his demon purple eyes, scanning where the danger was. Time slowed down for Izuku before he saw Wakaba running forward, his staff raised high into the air. Wakaba was angry. He only realized that he had wasted half of the exam time arguing for 2 points, and by the time he managed to find some villain bots, there was only 2 minutes left. He had only gotten 6 points, all by rather dubious means like kill-stealing other people's bots. It was obvious he would not pass the exam with just that, and that made him angry. "It's all the Quirkless brand's fault. Without him, I would have passed the recommendation exam," shouted Wakaba, finding his logic to be impeccable despite the fact Izuku had never even met him. "And now he's going to make me fail this exam. I'll show him what it means to cross me." Wakaba, in his mind, thought Izuku wouldn't pass due to his quirkless status, so he wanted revenge, and as soon as he spotted Izuku, he made up his mind. If Izuku was harmed, he would use his family's influence to push it down. Even if he refused, it wasn't as if the boy had some sort of supreme backing behind him. If anything, he should be considered blessed to be a target for me, elevating his existence, thought Wakaba. Since he was going to fail, he wanted to make sure the other boy lived a handicapped life. unable to truly do anything with the brain damage he was going to cause. Wakaba theorized that even if the boy died, he would be blameless and walk free without guilt. And so, Wakaba threw the staff at Izuku's head with all his strength, augmented by his quirk. "Watch out," shouted Setsuna when saw Wakaba hurling the staff like a javelin at Izuku's head, her body already splitting apart. Setsuna tried to send her body parts to intercept and hopefully block the staff with said limbs. Even if they were damaged or destroyed, she could regenerate them with rest. However, they moved too sluggishly for her own liking. She had been using it to destroy villain bots, save a few examinees from being hit, and acting as a distraction while her hand silently slammed the shutdown button. In short, she was tired and out of stamina, and was unable to intercept. Izuku's gaze, however, was completely calm. While his right hand was helping steady the hurt examinee, his left hand was free. Quickly summoning a stone from his artifact, Izuku threw the stone at the staff at an angle, causing it to divert from its original path ever so slightly. The staff deviated the left and slightly up, enough that Izuku had to move his head to the side to dodge it. He allowed it to scruff past his hair, taking some off but unharmed. The staff continued its path until it hit the zero-pointer villain bot, and did absolutely nothing to it. It was, however, considered an attack against it. Wakaba paled at the thought of losing all his points that he stood there in shock as the zero-pointer began to turn towards it, his legs shaking in fear that yellow liquid began to seep down his pants. "Time's up," announced Present Mike, ending the exam and saving Wakaba. The boy stood there in shock and fear as other examinees passed him, giving him a look of disgust as the smell of urine hit them. It wasn't until a staff member doing final checks finally noticed Wakaba standing there, and he was reluctant to even touch Wakaba. Recovery Girl absolutely refused to touch him, though it was easy to see the boy wasn't even harmed, just in shock. HLHLHLH, laughed Setsuna as the students were dismissed, lining up to pick up their cell phones and other personal items. "Did you see that fat idiot's face?" "Talkage, it's not nice to laugh at other people's misery," chided Izuku lightly, though his face also held a grin. "I hope he gets disqualified for that shit he pulled," huffed Setsuna. "Asshole tried to hit you twice on purpose now." "No way the examiners didn't see that." Izuku shrugged at that. He had felt worse killing intent when he had gone to the training realm. Soon, they collected their personal belongings and were walking out when Setsuna held up her phone. "Hey, give me your number. I wouldn't mind hanging out with you if we have some free time," offered Setsuna. Izuku saw no harm in it and exchanged numbers. "Hopefully your girls won't get jealous of another girl hanging out with you," teased Setsuna. "Who knows, maybe I'll join their little group." Izuku lightly blushed before saying goodbye to Setsuna. It was only day 1 of 2 days of testing, so there was no reason to celebrate until after the second day. As Izuku was getting on the train, he saw a text coming from Setsuna. "And you can call me by my first name, Setsuna, if you don't mind me calling you Izuku." Setsuna. Izuku smiled at gaining a new friend in this world, though he should consider getting some male friends too. Katsuki counted, technically, but it wouldn't hurt to expand. Just as Izuku was about to leave, he heard someone from behind. Excuse me," said the voice. "You're the one who saved me, right?" Izuku turned around to see it was the girl that he had saved before passing her to Tenya. "My name is Tojiki Chikuchi," introduced the girl. "Thank you for saving me while everybody else just ran past me." "Don't worry about it," smiled Izuku. "I'm glad you weren't seriously hurt." Recovery Girl saw to that. Nodded Chikuchi. "I know I didn't get enough points to make it into the hero course, but I hope you do." With that, Chikuchi quickly walked away, her face blushing. Second day testing. As all students were finishing up with the exams, a staff member was sneaking his way into a computer, pulling up student records. While the rescue points had yet to be counted for, the villain points were already tabulated. Ka, muttered the staff member before he found it. Then, in another window, he pulled up Izuku's name. "Remember, kid, you're just a quirkless brat who doesn't know how big the world is. There are some people you can't offend, especially as a nobody," grinned the staff member as he deleted Izuku's score of 57 villain points, putting a fat 0 while giving Wakaba an additional 57 points. Why would the staff member do such a thing? He was actually the same person who had been responsible for dispensing support gear in Izuku's exam group, and also Wakaba's uncle. "Nobody would care about that brat," hummed the staff member. "Even if he does cry foul, we can just shut him up easily. Plus, we can say that it was his staff that hit the zero-pointer, since it's technically registered to him." Wakaba's uncle left with a grin on his face, closing and locking the door. Slowly, the vent to the said room opened up to reveal Nezu with a ferocious grin on his face. Well, look at what we have here," mused Nezu as he landed in front of the computer. He logged onto the computer, noticing what the man had done, putting his furry hand to his chin. Obviously, the point should be corrected to its proper place, but what fun can I have with this Wakaba-ka? Mused Nezu as he began tapping the keyboard. Izuku's points were properly restored while Wakaba's points were back to just 6. Then Nezu put a note stating he was disqualified for such blatant acts of sabotage, with an email to all other accredited universities with hero courses about said examinee, effectively giving him a black mark with no chance of ever becoming a hero. Now then, for the other cadaver, mused Nezu, not bothering to correct himself. In his mind, that staff member would become one soon anyways. Wakaba Teisho, hummed Nezu as he pulled up the said staff member's file. He's definitely not an employee of UA. Otherwise he'd be fired years ago. Ah, he's a lone staff member from the Hero Public Safety Commission. More blackmail for me. How generous of them to give me a belated birthday gift. The UA entrance exams hosted too many examinees trying out that the usual UA staff would not be able to handle the workload, so they would have temporary hires or loans from other agencies or those willing to volunteer. Usually Nezu only accepted temporary hires with no real authority than just basic monitoring or volunteers from other hero agencies he felt were trustworthy. But the HPSC almost managed to put some of their staff members in on such occasions. While Nezu was not an anarchist, and he worked with the government and had some government employees that he liked, he and the current HPSC got along like oil and water, or oil and fire, with the result being everything being destroyed, depending on how people looked at it. Really, it was like a cold war between the two, with each one itching to blow the other up. It had gone slightly down, but only very slightly, when the previous president of the HPSC retired and a new one took his place. Nezu hummed as he finished correcting everything, double-checking all scores by bringing up another copy of the scores that he had backed up at midnight to ensure no other changes had been made before locking the scores with his own personal password that nobody knew. He could have done so at midnight, but the fact that it could be used as bait against the HPSC was too tempting. With that, Nezu slipped back into the vent. And done, cheered Ochako as they were at Izuku's home to celebrate the ending of their entrance exam. Cheers, exclaimed everyone as they raised their cups in reply, whether they were confident they passed or not. They were all damn tired from the tests they had to go through and wanted to take a break, so a private party had been organized with parental supervision. Momo had ordered an extra-large sushi boat for them all to eat with real wasabi, along with some other food such as ramen or any high-carb food to replenish themselves. Izuku, Ochako, Itsuka, and Yui ate the most, considering they had gone through the most intensive exams of their life and needed to replenish themselves. What made it more enjoyable was not only did Izuku's father find the time to celebrate, but all 3 of Izuku's masters were there to celebrate, along with their wives. While everyone was mingling, Izuku met with his masters in private in another room. Well then, our disciple is growing up, laughed Yonkai as he rubbed Izuku's head, making a mess of his already fluffy hair. So how'd you feel you did? Asked Nilai. Good, I think I got around 55 points, said Izuku. Would have gotten more if I didn't try to help others. Just shows how good your situational awareness is, complimented Tang-san. If you focus only on what's in front of you, you may miss out on the bigger picture and the war itself. But enough about that. Since you are graduating high school, that means you are an adult in the eyes of your society. All 3 masters were confused about the education system that Izuku attended, but chose not to comment on it as it wasn't their society. Plus the fact that even commoners could get an education seemed good for them, and were planning to introduce such systems in their own world for the more common people. And so, we have been told that it is common to have these graduation gifts. And since you are our student, it is only fair that we participate in such things, smiled Tang-san as he pulled out a jade green herb with 3 snow-white leaves. This is the full moon wearing autumn dew. This will improve your purple demon eyes immensely to mustard seed level. Just squeeze the dewdrops into the eye before you cultivate it. While that's useful, you'll love mine, bragged Yonkai as he barged in after Tang-san gave Izuku the herb as well as some notes on constructing some of the hidden weapons. Here, take this. It's the myriad drug cream that my wife helped make. Yonkai pulled out a 40-ounce hydro flask from his storage ring to showcase it. Just put a drop of this in a cup of water once a day only. This will improve your cultivation and cleanse your body of impurities and promote longevity. This should be more than enough to use until you can't feel its effects anymore, meaning your body has been cleansed to its peak, making you no different than the geniuses at birth. Of course, this means you can share some with your friends if you want to, though the same restriction applies. Yonkai had not brought this out earlier in Izuku's training because he wanted Izuku to have a firm and solid foundation before using it. Oh, and a spare storage artifact, chimed in Yonkai as he held out a belt with 24 milky white jades evenly distributed on it. Tang-san wanted one crafted for you so you didn't always have to depend on the sealed world orb to pull out any hidden weapons needed. Also, he mentioned that it was a rite of passage for Tang sect members to have one. Haha, you all gave him some nice gifts, but I got him the best one, bragged Nilai as his nose was pointed up into the air. Behold, my graduation gift. Nilai held out a colored orb in front of Izuku, who looked at it in confusion. It became clear when Izuku saw something moving inside it. It's a demon spirit, more importantly a dragon type 1, explained Ally. It's time for you to have a demon spirit now. Your soul realm is strong enough to contain it. I made an extraordinary growth level rate for now, and I'll upgrade it to god growth when you're stronger. Considering its type, I think it fits you quite well. Don't integrate it right now, do it later. Go ahead and cultivate Tang Sen's gift first along with Yonkai. Wait about 5 days of using the cream before integrating it. Thank you, masters, bowed Izuku in gratitude, tears threatening to spill out of his eyes. You've been carrying a great weight in your heart all this time, haven't you? Sighed Tang Sen as he gently pushed Izuku back straight. Remember what Yonkai told you. We took you in because of the strength of your character, not because of your skills or strengths. So long as you stand strong and proud in the path you've chosen and never turn away from it, we will support you. So stand tall and proud, for we certainly are proud of you. Izuku didn't hold back as tears sprouted from his eyes like geysers, causing the trio to chuckle at Izuku's state. 5 days later at UA University, Dean Nezu was having a faculty meeting in regards of finalizing the results as well as which student would be going to which class. Attending the meeting, much to his disdain, was the current HPSC male president, Minas Makari, as the government representative. As much as Nezu wanted to completely own UA, he wasn't allowed to do so with the checks and balances placed into the system. To be fair, he was training future heroes to work as government employees, so it could be argued that the government needed a voice and eye over his university. Currently, thanks to using shell companies and various dubious means that are borderline illegal, Nezu did own 90% of UA. The 10% belonged to various government agencies. So it is official, started Nezu as he pulled up the students that had been accepted into the hero course. These will be our new students for the upcoming semester. There are a total of 42 names on the list that was going to be split in half. One was led by Aizawa Shota, aka Eraserhead, while 1B would be led by Sekijiro Kan, aka Vlad King. Usually, 4 recommended students and 36-38 top-scoring students would join the hero course. The reason for the variance was that homeroom teachers could put in their own recommendation outside the exams. Vlad King had done a few during his tenure while Eraserhead had 0 on his. This, of course, put the hero who recommended said person at risk in his reputation and job if said recommendation was a failure. But so far, Vlad King had none. My recommendation is up there, right? Clarified Vlad King, having submitted his recommendations months ago. Yes, she is there, nodded Nezu, appreciative that Vlad King was so organized with his work ethic. A bit bombastic, but still someone Nezu enjoyed working with, as having a neat work ethic meant less paperwork. Now then, I've already devised how the class will be separated, began Nezu as he clicked on a clicker, making the names move to 2 separate columns. You may notice that. That was when Eraserhead interrupted. Sorry, but I'm putting up a recommendation too. Nezu blinked before clicking his tongue in irritation for a second, taking a moment to mask his emotions before replying. Well, that's a surprise. You've never taken a student in before during your tenure here. Just who exactly has caught your eye? And I suppose I'll need to move the lowest score to the general course. Hitoshi Shinso. And I've already chosen the student he'll be replacing, stated Eraserhead as he tapped a few buttons on his phone. On the screen itself, Izuku's name was highlighted before being deleted and replaced with Hitoshi's name. Done. Now we can continue, said Eraserhead without a care about whose future he had crushed. Now hold up, shouted Toshinori, currently in his All Might form. Midoriya Izuku has more than earned his spot in the hero course. Toshinori glanced at Nezu, who immediately pulled up Izuku's score. Look at that. 57 villain points and 43 rescue points, totaling to 100 points. In fact, he's the current leader in the leaderboard. Why would you dismiss such a potential candidate for? As Toshinori paused, Nezu pulled out Hitoshi Shinso's records besides Izuku, someone who only got 4 villain points and 15 rescue points, with a total of just 90. The difference is just too vast. It makes no sense to disqualify the top candidate for this, not to mention on the written exam. Midoriya scored nearly 100%. Shinso scored 85%, which is impressive, but to just drop Midoriya out of the hero course is too drastic. It's too irrational, as you would say. Accepting Midoriya is irrational, replied Eraserhead, causing the staff to turn towards him. Midoriya is strong, no doubt, but the key difference is here. Eraserhead clicked on his tablet, revealing the quirk status of said candidates. On Shinso's status, it was revealed that his quirk was brainwashing, causing quite a stir among the staff. On Izuku's own, it was clearly written and read that he was quirkless. The entrance exam is biased to those with flashy quirks. Hitoshi was unable to use his quirk on the villain bots. Otherwise he would have gotten a higher score, explained Eraserhead. But Midoriya has no quirk, and yet he was able to get so many points, argued All Might, even excluding him. There was another female examinee whose quirk made her invisible, and yet she was able to garner enough points to pass. Granted, she just barely made it past the cutoff. No offense to Hitoshi's body, but based on their profile pictures we have here, Midoriya has clearly been training while Hitoshi, well, he's not fat, but he doesn't look like he's been training as hard as Midoriya. And that's the difference, said Eraserhead coldly. Midoriya has already hit his peak while Hitoshi has the potential to do the same, but also has a quirk. Accepting Midoriya into the hero course would be irrational as he would only plateau in his current state, unable to improve or assist while the other students grow stronger. I can train Hitoshi to become just as strong. And I'm willing to bet that if the two were to fight, Hitoshi would easily win. All Might felt the winds changing as more staff seemed to agree, along with the HPSC president, and frowned. This wasn't fair. True, the world was unfair, as Shota would quote, but this went beyond that. This was clearly a bias and injustice against quirkless people, and to him, it rankled deeply within him. Especially after his talk with Izuku at the rooftops. He couldn't help but thumb the bottle that the boy had given him. Hold on, I can't agree to that, shouted Present Mike, voicing his displeasure. The boy clearly has the right attitude. It would be unfair to just disqualify him just because of his quirk status. Present Mike liked Izuku as being the only one who was willing to answer him during the presentation. This world is unfair, snorted Eraserhead. We would be foolish to send someone with no powers to be a hero. Midoriya can join the police force if he wants to, but a hero is a first responder to many situations, and he would only hold others back, being unable to do anything. Also, as the homeroom teacher of 1A, I have the freedom to do whatever we want about the circumstances of our students. So even if he does make it in, I'm expelling Midoriya out of the heroics course the moment he sets foot into UA. He can join the general education, but no amount of complaining or crying will change my mind. I'm just moving up the timetable. Shota, said Midnight, a very curvaceous lady with long, thick, spiky purple hair. That's outrageous, even for the amount of freedom we're allowed. To expel a student who hasn't even started, nor has done anything to deserve this treatment. You may hold me in contempt for this, but believe me, this will be better for the long run, said Eraserhead. It is irrational to feed someone with a pipe dream. I can't help but agree with him, said Ectoplasm, another hero staff member who looked down at his fake legs. The world of heroes is a dangerous place, even for us. I've lost my legs in a villain attack. But if it wasn't for my quirk to create clones of myself, I would have lost more, even my life. Midoriya doesn't have that to fall back on. I don't agree, argued Vlad King. He has potential to shine. Nor does he deserve to be booted out with his score. He is clearly passionate about becoming a hero. Look at his rescue points. He aided others when most other examinees wouldn't. He has the highest out of all of them. Is that not what we look for in heroes? Is that not why we have them? Arguments began to fly back and forth, letting Toshinori feel helpless until a loud clap could be heard. Everyone turned to the source to see it was the HPSC president who had made the noise. I believe we've let this argument run long enough, said the HPSC president Minas. Indeed, I have questions about the qualifications of two of the candidates. Midoriya is one of them, and the other I have concerns about is Vlad's own recommendation, Toga Himiko. Vlad King clenched his fist at that. Himiko was someone whom he had discovered by coincidence, mainly when he attended a family reunion. Himiko had been present with her parents, being silent and never speaking unless ordered to by her parents. But Vlad King could see the cracks on her mask starting to break, and knew if it broke, it would be disastrous. According to their relationship, Vlad King was Himiko's mother's cousin 3 times removed, so he could claim he was Himiko's uncle. He knew his cousin's personality as being a strict control freak that wanted to remove anything freakish. Not only that, Vlad could see that Himiko was suffering some sort of withdrawal of some vital nutrients that was very similar to his own. His own diet included the increased need for blood, as his quirk operated on using his own blood. So Vlad managed to sneak Himiko away for a private conversation. And upon learning that she also needed blood and was being denied such a basic need because it was seen as freakish, Vlad exploded. Himiko didn't even know that she needed blood, just that she craved it, but her parents kept denying it, telling her it wasn't normal. Even the so-called counselor that Himiko had been bought to told her it wasn't normal. Vlad scoffed at the third-rate counselor as he brought out an emergency blood pack he always carried and had Himiko drink it. He could see Himiko hesitating before she could no longer resist and biting in, relishing the blood going through her body with a bloody insane smile that would freak most people out, but not Vlad. Vlad confronted the said parents, and after a long and bloodless argument Vlad adopted Himiko as his niece and sent to live with him. It was there that he discovered how much of a rare gem Himiko was when he was exercising with her. But the need for blood. Vlad had Himiko working out to increase the efficiency of her blood flow to lower the need for blood, something her parents had always disdained. Vlad discovered Himiko's talent for reading others, her insane cat-like reflexes, flexibility, and being able to naturally daggers. So when Vlad asked if she wanted to be a hero under his recommendation, Himiko cried and said yes. But despite all this, Himiko did have a rather dark history, including attempted stabbings and other freakish incidents that her parents did nothing to help. And now, her position was being threatened. It was clear in Vlad's eyes that the HPSC was using this to force Vlad in a position that would be advantageous to the HPSC. No doubt that Eraserhead's discovery of Hitoshi had been perpetrated by them. Nezu hissed a little, knowing this was the HPSC trying to get a petty comeback at them. Nezu had exploited his blackmail material on Wakaba already to get what he wanted, and Minus had to grit his teeth and comply with it. Now he was trying to threaten another upcoming student. Then again, I suppose since it is the recommendation from Vlad King, who has had several successful recommendations already, there should be no problems with this one, stated Minus. Why don't we put this to a vote on this Midoriya Izuku? I do remember that you mentioned the fourth villain bot would cause an examinee's score to 0 out if attacked, and the staff that attacked it belonged to Midoriya. Eraserhead obviously voted to expel Midoriya, along with Snipe and Ectoplasm and a few others. Vlad King hesitated, noticing the HPSC's stare at him before glancing at Nezu, who sighed and nodded, before raising his hand to vote against Midoriya. Though it pained him to do so, he wanted to protect his niece. Kashinori huffed and was about to vote for Midoriya when Eraserhead's voice cut through. You're not officially part of the staff, so you have no vote. While present Mike, Midnight, and others refused to vote against Midoriya. All that was required to remove a student from the hero course was the HPSC input along with one of the homeroom teachers of the UA hero course, along with 2 or more votes from the staff. Nezu wasn't allowed to vote, being the dean of UA University. Well then it's official, clapped Minus. Though he showed a good showing, Midoriya Izuku's enrollment to the hero course will be terminated. In fact, we should probably send him a letter of rejection from UA altogether, and perhaps a black mark to prevent him from attempting to join a hero course from any university, as well as any courses even remotely related to. His speech was interrupted when he felt his phone ring. Quickly peeking at it, he paled when he saw it was from Nezu, with an attachment of no doubt another blackmail piece. Minus glanced at Nezu, who merely smiled as his paw hovered the screen, ready to mass send it to everyone. Then again, that may be going too far, coughed my knees. No, perhaps this will open his eyes that not everybody can be heroes, no matter how much training one puts in, though his talents may lay in other fields. And in the long run, he will thank us for this. With that, the meeting was finished with the students organized into which class they would be attending. Hour later, Nezu sat in his comfy chair, staring at his tablet from the umpteenth time as he had to compose that damning letter to Midoriya that he was rejected. Eraserhead suggested that because the staff was his, he had lost all his points due to the attack against the 0-point villain bot, and that it was his fault for losing it in the midst of battle, despite the obvious proof it had been stolen from him by a disgruntled student and a staff member. Eraserhead hadn't bothered to review that footage, deeming it unnecessary. Nezu merely glared at him, causing Eraserhead to raise his hands and surrender before leaving, though not before mentioning that he would volunteer to record the rejection letter if needed. The door opened up once more as Nezu took another sip of his tea to reveal 2 female figures, one who strode in and sat on the chair directly in front of Nezu while the other stood by the door, her eyes flashing everywhere as a dutiful bodyguard. Both of them were wearing HPSC badges. So, not doing well? Asked the female after a minute, letting Nezu finish his tea. Depends, said Nezu, his eyes flashing as he poured himself another cup of tea. I heard, said the woman, and I don't agree with the president's decision, but it is out of my hands for now. You're one of the few ones that I would launch out of a cannon and maybe regret it, Mrs. Lisa Housey, said Nezu bluntly. The female chuckled. Coming from you, that's high praise. At one point of time, this person would have become someone known as Madam President after her predecessor died. But instead of assuming the spot, she threw her whole career at risk to save a hero she knew didn't deserve to be lambasted for her actions. In the end, she managed to save said hero at the almost cost of said career. She was instead shifted aside as Minus rose to power, who shared the same egotistical view of his predecessor. Lisa never regretted her actions, as it led to her current bodyguard who had protected her from many incidents, and was also currently in line to being the guardian of her younger family members if anything happened to her. The one who was currently in the room with her, known as Tsutumi Kaina, aka Lady Nagant. And while she did not hold the prestigious position of being the president, her power base was not something to be overlooked either. Should I assume that you want someone to be shot? Asked Kaina with a sarcastic tone, because I'm out of that business for a long time. No, though if you wish, you can be Plan M, said Nezu whimsically. Sometimes it just feels better to be the one doing it. Kaina shivered on the fact that Nezu apparently had 12 other contingency plans in place already, and maybe more. So what do you plan to do? Asked Lisa. You managed to prevent the boy from being downright slandered and shut sideways. But there's still the fact he did achieve an impressive score without a quirk. Too many people think you need a powerful quirk just to do what is right. But in the end, justice without power is just helplessness. Nezu remained silent before tapping on his desk for a little, causing everyone inside to get slightly nervous. "Did you know," asked Nezu as he finally spoke out, "that Midoriya is the victim of the Aldera Middle School case?" Lisa and Kaina winced at that. That had been a very big case that Nezu had went on a killing spree, so to speak. Nezu had always been an advocate against bigotry and racism due to his own experiences. And added to the fact the famous Yaoyorozu family even funded his said rampage was even more destructive. One hero had foolishly tried to intervene against the two giants and had been forcefully retired and went on vacation. Nobody had heard of him since then. "Wait, that means he has some sort of connections with the Yaoyorozu family," said Lisa slowly, "and you didn't warn them about the possibility of facing backlash from them." "It is hardly my fault that they never read my reports," scoffed Nezu, "but this still remains. As much as I enjoy working with Morino Yaoyorozu on those who deserve it, Midoriya has done nothing to warrant this sort of treatment. If this gets out, UA is most likely liable to be sued on the grounds of favoritism and bigotry, and they will have grounds for it. Not to also mention that the HPSC will be dragged into this." Lisa frowned at Nezu's words, especially the fact he used "will be," not "maybe," meaning that he would drag them down and possibly be thrown into the firing line as a scapegoat without guilt. Still, he was right. The boy had been unjustly treated without cause. The core matter is what they could do to alleviate the upcoming storm. "And I suppose the data in regards to the scores was somehow leaked?" asked Lisa. "Yes, but not in the way you're thinking," sighed Nezu. "Somehow, despite Power Loader's best efforts in creating an impenetrable security system, which as you know is rated perhaps the highest, with only a few exceptions that exceed its defense, was somehow breached. Nothing vital was stolen, though the scores on the entrance exam were copied. Though it is unknown who the hacker is, no doubt it is going to make its way to the Yaoyorozu family. They have a very special interest in Midoriya. I went through the files and found out that they even bought the land Midoriya currently resides in and practically gifted it to him, manor included. It is unknown how they are connected, but it just is. Power Loader has managed to somewhat trace the hacker's pathway, but he lost it mid-route. Though he says he recognizes the hacking logarithm, and says the hacker, whomever it may be, is actually relatively harmless, never leaking important data. Impressive, hummed Lisa, though no doubt they'll claim they got it from the HPSC. Naturally, said Nezu without batting an eye. I had that file saved into the HPSC system. Perhaps I have a suggestion, recommended Kaina, inserting herself into the conversation. Though I am considered retired from hero duty, I still have my skills and experiences as a hero. From what I've gathered, Midoriya Izuku has obviously trained himself, and is quite intelligent based on his exams. I could take him on as an apprentice, and let him garner real-time experience with me as an intern. It may not be UA, but it's better than nothing. A kind gesture, one that I can put as plan E for now, smiled Nezu, but I have my own eye on the boy. Lisa raised an eyebrow, to which Nezu passed a document over to Lisa. Back during the whole Aldera scandal, Midoriya approached me for an autograph. He passed me a notebook, which I noted was called Future Hero Analysis Vol. 10. So while I flipped through the pages, I also perused a few and took a few photos with my hidden camera before I signed it. What does this tell you? Lisa scanned through the document, her face making very minute gestures before taking a deep breath. He did this in middle school, asked Lisa, getting a nod. I can see why this caught your eye. Only 12 years old, and he's already outdoing specialized quirk analysts and counselors who have just graduated. If he's been keeping this up, no doubt he'll outdo most of the senior analysts when he enters UA. With this talent, Nezu nodded. So with that being said, I'm afraid I'll have to cut this meeting short. I have others to see. Lisa stood up and left, with Kaina following behind him. Nezu took this time to close his beady little eyes, preparing himself for the next meeting he needed to go through. A few minutes later, Toshinori entered, already deflated to his true form. Nezu, there has to be something we can do, exclaimed Toshinori, his fist pounding on the desk. The boy does not deserve to be railroaded like this. You seem more eager to defend this Midoriya, said Nezu lightly, perhaps a possible successor. Toshinori hesitated for a second, catching Nezu's eyes as he continued, or something more. The boy is well trained, clearly has a good muscle structure, and knows how to fight. The way he moves shows efficiency. And finally, instead of focusing only on fighting villains to gain points, he instead helped others without hesitation. Even when others insulted him, he kept going with due diligence. And finally, even when the 0-point villain bot was revealed, his first priority was not to run, but to ensure other examinees made it safely, all while being sabotaged by another examinee. So what else would you want? Surely not something else. Toshinori knew what Nezu was hinting at and shook his head. I admit, he is a very good potential successor. And you know I do not care about whether a person's quirk is powerful or not, or if it's even there. No, I want to. No, I need to meet him before anything else. I need to apologize to him. Toshinori took a deep breath as he closed his eyes. He could still see Izuku's face of cold fury at his words, and knew he was wrong. Not only that, but recently he had a dream about Nana. Except on Nana's face wasn't a smile, but rather a look of disappointment. Those two faces hurt him much more than all for one could ever do. I met Midoriya about 10 months ago. I had been chasing after the slime villain. And when I found the villain, he was attacking Midoriya, who easily dodged his attacks. I captured him into a bottle and foolishly did not check to make sure it was secure before taking my leave. Midoriya tried to warn me, but in my haste, I ended up taking him with me to the rooftops. There, he asked me if I believed a quirkless person could become a hero. My time unfortunately ran out, exposing my secret. After ensuring that he would not say anything, I gave the most asinine answer to his question and said no. The boy was in the same situation as I was, and instead of following my master's example, I became a damn hypocrite. Toshinori clenched his chest, gripping at his wound. I let my own injury and jaded view distort what I truly believed in and almost shattered his dreams. And here is he today, proving to me that I was wrong. Right now, he truly deserves the title hero more than I do. And yet because he's quirkless, he is being looked down upon. For what? Just not having a quirk. A real hero does not need a powerful quirk to help others. I cannot live without knowing that there was something I could do to help him. Nezu gave Toshinori a disappointed glance, but chose not to say anything. The man was already regretting his words and repenting, so there was no need to rub it in. So are you going to tell him about your quirk, and possibly pass it on to him? Asked Nezu. Toshinori paused before sheepishly looking at Nezu. That may be a rather difficult request. You see, when he left, he swore that he would cut all connections with me. He may not even accept my apology, much less my quirk. It has been 10 months, and I was looking for the boy. Unfortunately, at that time, I failed to get his name, making it difficult to track him. I only knew that he was going to try out for the hero course despite my bad advice. So Plan B2 is out then, mused Nezu, causing Toshinori to raise his eyebrow. He knew the rat overlord had plans within plan, but to think becoming One for All's new host was actually only Plan B, and Part 2 at that. I'm almost afraid to ask, but what is your Plan A? Asked Toshinori. Nezu merely looked at Toshinori before cackling in maniacal laughter, causing Toshinori to shiver. In the end, he never did get to figure out what Plan A was, though something deep in his bones told him it was terrifying. 2 days later, everyone who had participated in UA's entrance exam were getting their letters of acceptance or rejection, depending on how they did. While 99.8% of examinees cried at their rejection, at Izuku's manor, everyone was slowly opening their own letters. Momo watched with happiness as Ochako, Itsuka, and Yui received their acceptance letters. Alongside them were the parents of each one of them, cheering alongside with them. And serving tea for them was Tobito-san. Please do not pour tea from up that high, lectured Momo. That is golden tips imperial that you are spilling. My apologies. Yaoyorozu-sama, apologized to Baido Denjuro. I got a little excited. Don't bully my gentle, cried out a short female maid with red hair. Aba, don't cry, said Denjuro. It was my fault for getting excited. I was wasting tea when I shouldn't have. Oh gentle, swooned Minami Aba. The two of them had been recruited during Izuku's high school years to help clean the manor when Inko wasn't around. It had been a complete coincidence since Izuku had taken Momo and his master's wife, Yizian and Xingning Chang, out to a cafe where they served exquisite tea. They had encountered the two villains in the making, and from them everything spiraled out of control. Making a long story short, the two female masters captured the two, and after a long talk, they quietly turned themselves in for their crimes, which was really small. Then Izuku asked Momo, who asked her parents to help them, who easily agreed to hire lawyers for them. In the end, they were released with a slap on the wrist and made to do community service, to which then they were quickly swept into Yaoyorozu's arms, to work as a maid and butler at Izuku's manor while also doubling up as security detail. This made Denjuro sort of happy, as it would allow him to use his quirk for often to train, and perhaps finally become a hero that he dreamed of becoming. Just a teacher rather than his old pathway of trying to become famous. Aba would follow Denjuro regardless of where he went. It was also she who had hacked into the UA as server for the exam results, wanting to hold it as a surprise for her employer. Izuku, let's take a look at yours, said Ochako excitedly. Everyone looked over to Izuku excitedly, knowing how difficult his path had been. And now, he was going to take his first step to proving everyone wrong. That being quirkless did not mean he was powerless. Not to mention he had calculated at least 50 villain points, and if the rescue points were valid, he had some in reserves, which should be more than enough to get him in. Aba giggled, having already seen Izuku's score, and knew he was in first place, something she shared with Denjuro. Izuku opened his letter, putting the device on the living room table to let everyone see his results. Each one of the other examinees had done the same, having no shame whether they had made it or not. They were all close friends, or in some cases, even more. Soon, the device began to display the message enclosed inside the storage device. What made them all suspicious was exactly who had been displayed on the message. Izuku and the others had gotten their acceptance letter from a recording from All Might himself, congratulating them on their acceptance to the hero course. Izuku and Yui had checked with a few other friends, some who wanted to enter the hero course but failed, and they had gotten a recorded message from Present Mike or Midnight, offering their condolences but telling them they qualified for the general education course. From the grapevine, Momo had heard that any students who had applied for the support course had their videos recorded by Power Loader, which made sense as he was the head department for said course. However, the one appearing before them was somebody they had no real clue who it was, and frankly he looked like a clean hobo. I think that's Eraserhead, said Izuku as he rubbed his chin with his hand. He's usually an underground hero. Everyone became silent when the video started playing. Midoriya Izuku. I am Aizawa Shota, a professor and hero in UA University. In the written examination, you scored 98%. In the practical exam, you got 57 villain points and 43 rescue points, totaling to 100 points. At that, everyone was getting excited, knowing Izuku had practically blown the exam out of the water with these points. However, you foolishly decided to attack the 0-point villain bot with the staff that was registered to you. You were warned that your points would be reduced to 0 if you did so you have a total of 0 points. What? Exclaimed all of them. That's not fair. Izuku didn't even use the staff, it was stolen from him, shouted Izuku in outrage. I find it hard to believe such an oversight could have been Izuku's fault, said an incensed Momo. Ochako and Yui both gripped the table, activating their quirks by accident, causing the said table to shrink and float away, dropping the device onto the ground. But it continued playing. I don't care if you lent it to someone or you dropped it. That is your responsibility. A hero cannot let anyone borrow his tools, so the responsibility falls to you. There is another chance to join the hero course, and that is to participate in the annual UA Sports Festival. However, with your status, I will advise you to not bother participating in it to raise up your hopes. You have 0 potential to become a he. The video suddenly glitched, causing the image to distort until it changed to just black and white static with green words popping up that said no visual. Hello, I'm Nezu, the one that could be a dog or a mouse or a bear, but more importantly, I'm the Dean of UA University, chimed in a voice from the device, surprising them all. This is a live communication as of right now. May I know if I am speaking to Midoriya Izuku? I would prefer to speak face to face. So to speak, Izuku cleared his throat before replying, yes. Excellent, replied Nezu. Do I have permission to turn on visuals so both sides can see each other? And are you alone or with family? I would prefer to talk in private. Yaoyorozu Hataru cleared his throat, giving Izuku a look of permission to speak before getting a nod back. He's with friends, and we would prefer if you spoke to all of us here. From what we've seen from the video, you'll have to be very convincing to prevent us from suing the hell out of UA University, and trust me, from what we've gathered, we have very good grounds to do so. Yaoyorozu Morino. No, the voice sounds a little different and younger. Perhaps this is Yaoyorozu Hataru, asked Nezu. Very well, so long young Midoriya allows it. Hataru gave Aba a glance, who immediately retrieved her laptop, pulling up all relevant documents. After a quick and small discussion, it was decided that for adult supervision, Inko, Hisashi, Aba, Denjuro, Hataru and his wife Mami, Itsuka, Momo, Yui, and Ochako stayed with Izuku for emotional support. The static screen cleared up to reveal Nezu sitting in his armchair, looking at them with tired eyes. Midoriya Izuku. I know how disappointed and angry you must be, began Nezu. In order to understand what happened, I will need to give you the full context. First off, it is already known to almost all my staff, and more importantly, to me, that the support gear that you requested was stolen and handed off to another examinee by one of our temporary employees. Rest assured, the staff member has been fired off and is facing punishment. You mean his contract is terminated? Asked Inko for clarification. Sure, let's go with that, hummed Nezu without clarifying his words. He had actually fired the said employee off in a canon in a literal sense, but he did terminate his employment and probably his life. Originally, I was going to send you a video requesting for you to come to UA to talk, but Aizawa preempted me by sending a recording of himself rejecting your admission to the UA hero course, to which you rightly deserve. Luckily, I had a feeling and snuck in something extra so I could still talk to you before too much damage was done. You're still not making me not want to sue you all to oblivion, said Hataru. Of course, nodded Nezu. Allow me to be more clear. As you know, we accept a total of 42 hero course students. 4 are from the recommendation exams, while the rest comes from the general exam. Our 2 homeroom teachers for the hero course, however, are allowed to make recommendations. One of them, Vlad King, made his own recommendation long ago and submitted the proper paperwork. The other one is the problem. Aizawa, or as you may know him as Eraserhead, made his decision to recommend a student rather abruptly. In fact, 2 days ago. Then he shouldn't be allowed to do so, frowned Hasashi. But even then, shouldn't you be removing the student with the lowest score? Our child seems to have gotten a high, if not the highest score. You're right, your son did in fact score the highest. Nodded Nezu. However, this meeting was also attended by HPSC. Nezu gave a voice of disgust at that word before continuing. Eraserhead pointed out that Midoriya Izuku is quirkless, and thus will be unable to grow more powerful even with our education, causing him to plateau or stagnate. The HPSC capitulated on that, and by a passing vote, much to my shame, he was cast out in replacement of another. May I ask who it is? Said Mommy lightly. I'm sorry, I cannot reveal that detail as of now, said Nezu apologetically. I can see that there are several children who are currently accepted into the hero course though. They can find out when the school year starts should the student choose to divulge that information. Mommy gave Nezu the stink eye before Denjiro passed a piece of paper to her, pouring some tea for everyone while he was there. Mommy took a deep breath before slamming the paper down, though Nezu showed no surprise reaction. Shinso Hitoshi, said Mommy dramatically. He's the one who's replaced our benefactor's disciple. Do you know how much of an insult this is? He only has 4 villain points and 15 rescue points, with a total of just 19, with a written score of 85%. I did not think your university practiced nepotism and favoritism to this degree. The top hero course university. Something like this is a joke, and you can be sure I will be bringing this to the news. Let everyone see the true colors of UA. Just another university who is willing to let students who are undeserving of such honor nor put in the hard work be allowed in while disqualifying those who deserve their merits only to have them stolen. Is this what your university practices? I'll be damned before I let my daughter go to your school if you don't give me an explanation. I am aware, said Nezu solemnly, not even surprised that they had discovered it. The final list had been sent into the HPSC network, so it was out of his paws if the results were leaked. But allow me to say something, continued Nezu. Though this is not disclosed to the students, all professors have the freedom to whatever they want to the circumstances of the students to a limit. This includes expelling students if they are deemed unable to handle the course load. Eraserhead has already made it clear in the meeting that if Midoriya Izuku was placed in his class, he would expel him out of the university without even letting Izuku defend himself and deafen himself to any complaints. The HPSC has backed him up on this power play. So what does that mean? Said Inko. My baby boy is unable to become a hero because a pathetic professor that you hired is unable to look past his eyes. That he would deafen voices because it doesn't go his way. That he is a quirkist despite claiming otherwise. Eraserhead has his own reasons, to which I disagree, said Nezu. But the key part is that Izuku will not be under his purview as of now. Nezu looked directly at Izuku, whose hands were tightly gripped into a fist that blood was spilling out of his palms in anger. Midoriya Izuku, though your application has been denied to the hero course, you can still try to prove yourself in the UA Sports Festival to transfer in. It would take longer, but it is still a viable path. Flowery words, but that's all it is, spat out Izuku. You can spout out words to sound good, but if you can't follow through, then it's pointless. Especially if this Eraserhead seems to have it out for me for just being quirkless. Even if I somehow do make it in, he would expel me for taking up space for those worthier before I even stepped in. Before you interrupted his video, he was already telling me not to bother even trying for that path. True, nodded Nezu, which is why I am offering another path. While it is true that both homeroom professors are the only ones allowed to make recommendations, they are not the only ones who hold that power. Which is why I, Dean Nezu and Pro Hero, am placing a recommendation for Midoriya Izuku to become a student of 1N. 1N, everyone repeated. 1N, confirmed Nezu. As of right now, there is only one student in said class. I am the one in charge of that class. A 1-to-1 session with me. And what does that entail? Asked Momo. For regular courses, which we can't skip, he will be placed in 1 degrees Celsius. Then when it comes to hero training, depending on what the hero course is doing, he will either join them or be with me, said Nezu with complete honesty. Why do this for me? Asked Izuku. Why not just ignore me like almost every other hero has done? I'm sure with your power base and cunning, you can easily have UA sidestep this and pin the blame on Eraserhead and the HPSC. I'm glad that you think so highly of me, smiled Nezu, while also very sad that today's heroes can't even do the right thing. Simply put, I believe in your potential. I remember when I first met you back at Auditorium Middle School, when you had me sign your notebook. I saw your analysis while flipping through the pages and took photos when you weren't looking. I was astounded at your ability. And you were just a middle school student with no intelligence-enhancing quirk, so I've always kept my eye out for you, in case you decided to enroll in my university. While others deny your achievements, I will not. In addition, in becoming a student in my own special course, you will be protected. No professor will have the power to expel you unless they go through me first. And they better have a good reason or else. Not to mention this will not only rub at the HPSC, this might frighten them into thinking I have an apprentice, cackled Nezu within his mind. The HPSC had always held on hope that the Cold War would end with Nezu's death, but with a successor on the rise, it might overturn everything they knew. My only request is that should you accept, that you hold your anger on UA, stated Nezu. I am aware that we have wronged you, but rest assured, I will do everything in my power to show the world that you can be a hero. Hayashi took a deep breath, and the HPSC. Feel free to do whatever you want, said Nezu bluntly. Should you somehow overturn the HPSC, I will send you a gift basket along with an all-expense-paid cruise trip around the world. Nezu looked at Izuku once more. In the end, it's your choice. I have made my offer, and I will respect whatever decision you make. Izuku nodded, closing his eyes to review everything. True, UA had completely disrespected him with this decision, but the dean of the said university was doing everything in his power to make it right. He then remembered Yonkai's words of advice. Those that respect me once, I respect them 10 times over, and those who wrong me once, I beat 3 times. While it was a rather violent creed, it was one that Izuku could understand. The major point lied in the HPSC and a few teachers in the UA department, specifically Eraserhead, were the ones who had disrespected him, and by proxy, his masters. He would not beat everyone who just happened to be in proximity, just the ones responsible. Izuku wanted to meet the ones who disrespected him eye to eye and prove them wrong. If I take your offer, said Izuku slowly, can you guarantee that I can participate in the provisional license exam? And if I do pass, get the said license? Naturally, said Nezu, otherwise I wouldn't have made this offer. I have enough influence to make sure no backdoor dealings will be pulled on you should you pass it. Good, said Izuku fiercely. I accept so long as I am not restricted to seeing Momo and the others outside class time. But of course, said Nezu, you'll have similar schedules. There is no point in restricting students from visiting other students in different departments. And I want to meet Eraserhead face to face and look him in the eye for disqualifying me for that inane reason, along with the student he decided to recommend on a whim, stated Izuku with finality. Nezu hesitated for a second before nodding. He could not push away the confrontation that would bound to pop up, so it was better to get it over with. Then Midoriya Izuku, may I welcome you to UA University, to your Hero Academia, declared Nezu. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.